Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com.
Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Put the children to bed. It's time for Dan and Aldo to bare their souls.
I love the Chicago Bears more than I do masturbating, and that is a lot.
Then, with 3 seconds left, Bob Avellini throws a 30-something-yard touchdown pass to Greg Latta, and the Bears win, and I literally shit my pants. I swear to God, I literally did.
Erik Kramer, for me, I love the guy. He's a tragic figure. I mean, he embodies all that is.
If they don't run the ball here, I'm going to vomit. I swear to God.
Look, I don't mean any disrespect. He just didn't play that well. Not for a guy of his caliber.
You know, they won, but I'm going to be miserable all week because they stunk.
I don't really have any recollection of that at all, but I guess perhaps I blacked it all out.
So, Dan, tape is the ultimate tool for scouts and for coaches to evaluate players, to detect plays and so forth. And they spend hours looking at tape, right? Why do they so often get shit wrong?
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan and Aldo.
Yeah, baby! Dan Aguirre, are you excited?
I am. I haven't been this excited since the last time I inserted my penis into a vagina.
How long ago was that?
I think that was over the weekend or whatever, but that's not the point. Two things about the intro that stood out to me there was A, Erik Kramer. How about that?
How about that?
Actually be on the show. But one of the things you say in the intro is that, they won, but they sucked, and I'm going to be miserable all week, which would be a good problem to have because following the preseason game that we saw over the weekend, you got your ass kicked by your former friend, and now I'm still miserable. So again, at least if we'd have won, that would be a good problem to have.
That is right. You are absolutely right, and I should let people know because they're already saying greetings, Erik Kramer. He will be with us. He's scheduled to be with us at the top of the hour. So Dan and I have about 25 minutes here to chat about what's going on with our Chicago Bears, this edition of the Chicago Bears. And you saw this preseason game where Mitch Trubisky carved up the Bears defense and Andy Dalton was booed, but immediately responded by throwing a touchdown pass. But nonetheless, the faithful are not feeling really good right now about this Chicago Bears offense nor defense, and especially the special teams. They look awful. So your thoughts on what's going on over at Hallis Hall?
It's amazing to me that every time we get rid of a player that they have a revenge game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could say in the overall scheme of things, this is going to be preseason and perhaps no one will ever remember it. We will. But it's not like you're going to be able to research it potentially on, say, Football Reference or whatever the source for or Pro Football Focus or what have you, wherever everyone's Bible is for football records, and say 10 years from now, who's going to look at this game? It really isn't going to matter. But I mean, seriously, we could do a roll call of people that were great all the way down to bums like Chris Conti, who still had a pick six on Cutler from Tampa when he was in Tampa. It's like every time somebody leaves the Bears, they have a moment against us that makes me like cringe. Like at some point, when do we have our moment? Not to be, I have a victim complex here, but goddamn.
No, I think you're right, though. It does feel that way, that, everyone that leaves the Chicago Bears has a moment against us. Leonard Floyd had it last season in that Rams game. And I could probably think of another half dozen.
Brian Greasy threw for 400 yards on us when he was with Tampa Bay in 2008 at Soldier Field to beat the Bears. If I recall correctly, Charles Tillman had a terrible penalty, and everyone loves Peanut, and rightfully so, but he had a terrible penalty. Robbie may have missed a field goal that day too. They cost us that game, but Greasy threw for 400 yards, his career high against us. Of course he did.
Oh, yeah, of course he did.
And don't forget the late Cedric Benson in 2009. What did he rush for? Like 220 yards on the Bears?
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, you could be, if Cade McNown would have ever played against the Bears, he would have thrown for 4 touchdowns.
Did Erik Kramer have a revenge game against the Bears?
He did not. As far as I can recall, he only played in 99 with San Diego. We did play them that year, but Jim Harbaugh played the whole game. And thankfully, Jim Miller defeated Jim Harbaugh that day.
Wow, that's the only impressive thing I can think of lately about Jim Miller.
I concur with that. Although Jim Miller's got good hair.
Yes. So what do you think about this quarterback controversy? And Justin Fields is definitely not going to start game one. And he is going to start the final preseason and get a half in. Andy Dalton is going to be rested as if he's earned to sit for this final preseason game. What's your thoughts about how Nagy is handling this?
Terribly. That's why I don't think that I jumped. A lot of people disagreed with me, which was fine. I mean, that's part of the fun of being fans, that we can discuss things. But I don't think I jumped to an emotional conclusion after the preseason game. I waited a full day before I put out there. I was like, man, just fire Nagy now. Like, have George McCaskey step in. Like, how much more do we need to see from this guy when you see Mitchell Trubisky have that half against him? And you just see that he's bumbling the shit again. Now, maybe some people took umbrage with me saying this should be Mike Pettin, but whom else on the staff would you hire? But okay, that's a fantasy. That's not going to happen. So, all right, Nagy's here to stay at least for one more year, probably 2. And so how do I think he's handling I feel like this is John Fox and Mike Glennon in 2017. It's inevitable that Fields is going to play at some point. Dalton has played terribly both games. At this point, why not just go with the kid? Like, I've been a supporter of Dalton the best I could be. And I will be against the Rams on Sunday Night Football. Like, I want him to perform well come September, was it 12th, 13th, whatever the fuck. But at this point, like, after watching those 2 games, how could you think that suddenly he's going to turn it on like he's, a member of the 96 Bulls and like, well, we really don't have to try in the preseason come October 31st, we got Jordan. We got Dalton. So, I mean, I think he should play against Tennessee Saturday. Try to establish some fluidity.
Try to get a drive going, like a 10-play drive for a touchdown where you've gotten 5 first downs. That'd be something to see before you throw them out there against the Rams defense. But I got to tell you, I don't know. I haven't seen every minute of every Matt Nagy press conference, so I haven't heard.
Lucky you.
I try to listen to them all, but I haven't heard this question asked of Matt Nagy, and I'd love to hear his response. Do you think that Andy Dalton gives you a better chance to beat the Rams week 1 than Justin Fields? Because I think that the answer to that may be that it's Justin Fields. I don't know for sure because I don't know what Fields is saying in the classroom. I don't know if he's fumbling around with some of the plays. I don't know. I haven't gone to a Hallis Hall practice, and what it breaks my heart because after going to almost every practice at Bourbonnais for 2 or 3 years, it breaks my heart that I haven't been over to Hallis Hall, so I haven't seen for myself. But it is clear, based on what I have seen, that Fields has the tools to make up for his lack of experience. And that is basically running away from the defense. He can get out on the edge and he can blow past defensive linemen and linebackers and pick up big time yards. Plus, he's got a major league arm. He can complete these deep passes and so forth. And one other point that I'd like to add to that is we have seen guys like Zach Wilson of the New York Jets go out there and perform with the starters. Why haven't we seen Justin Fields go out with the starters and perform? Because there's a very good chance that Justin Fields could go out with the number ones and play better than any rookie quarterback we've seen in recent memory. There's a chance that could happen, even with this terrible offensive line. But we don't know because we haven't seen it, and that really bugs me.
The question is, Saturday, if Fields is starting, if Jermaine Ifedi's back, and we know that Jason Peters is going to presumably be the starting left tackle, so are those two guys playing Saturday? Because I would really like to see Fields protected. That shot that he took against Buffalo made me sick, where they knocked his helmet off. I'm like, oh my God. First off, I don't care. All so many people were giving, how do you say it? Lachavius,
yeah.
Simmons, so much. Yeah, they were saying, oh, maybe we should try him at left tackle. No. He was awful at right tackle. The only person worse on the line at right. Oh yeah, the guy playing left tackle, Wilkinson. God, did you see the sequence when he literally got pancaked and gave up the sack in the same play?
I did indeed.
Oh
yes.
my God, he was knocked on his ass. It was. I mean, would I get knocked on my ass out there? Of course. But I mean, I'm not getting paid money, so I can be on here on the mic and point out his faults.
Right.
That guy cannot be the left tackle. So if Wilkinson's playing Saturday, or the Larry guy, what's his last name? The guy with the concussion.
Larry Borum.
Maybe he'll play left tackle then, because they seem to love him. I don't know. But you can't put Wilkinson out there and Simmons for Justin Fields Saturday and think that you're going to protect him. I guess Daniels is probably out till the Rams game, right?
Yeah, I think he's back at practice, but yeah, he's a guard, and that's the one position we've got some depth in. But yeah, I'd love to see him in the lineup.
Just have the five guys together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got 3 weeks left to build some sort of cohesiveness within your unit.
Yeah, it is the biggest concern with this Chicago Bears team, and there's several of them, that this offensive line may not be able to protect whoever is back there at quarterback. And, that one play where Justin Fields almost had his knock blocked off, clearly that was an issue with the offensive line. The right tackle there didn't pick up that blitzer. But was also, you can also point the finger at Justin Fields for not having the recognition. He was looking left, and he just kind of narrow-mindedly was focused to the left and didn't pick up that incoming rusher. He's got the capability to deke past that guy, but he's got to get that.
It's his second preseason game too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'd like to see him make that mistake by sending the man in motion the wrong way or something in the second preseason game.
Mm-hmm. Robbie's got some good news. He says, I made it past the first and second part of Google, got first set of interviews for cloud residency training coming up. Not quite sure what all that means, Robbie, but congratulations. And people are upset that you have not gotten a camera, and they're upset at me for the photo I chose of you for tonight's graphic.
What's the photo tonight?
You have glasses on. You're looking.
Well, I wear glasses. So.
Okay, so you're looking up at the camera with your hand behind your head. It's kind of a sexy, provocative photograph, but it's turning off some of your loyal followers. For instance,
What do they want from me? Jesus God.
Martin Pellicor says, I love this show. It would be more engaging and interesting if Dan was just on camera too. The photo thing is boring. I don't know how you could look at that picture and say it's boring, Martin.
I can't explain this anymore, though. Again, I've shown you so you can substantiate this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at work, and the computer towers are completely away from where the computer is, where the mic is. So there is no way to install a webcam. The towers are like 45, 90, 100 feet away, whatever. There's no way to do it. I'm at work. So, I mean, they got to get off my balls on that. Jesus. At least I'm here.
King Pookie Nation is in the chat room, and he's so excited that he met Greg Briggs. I think he meant Greg Braggs, who was on the South Burbs Hitman yesterday and was a hit, as he always is every time he's on a show here at the Barroom Network. And boy, oh boy, tomorrow morning, Dan, are you a fan of Sarah Spain, ESPN?
Absolutely. And I heard that she's going to talk about her mammary glands.
That is correct. She's going to talk about her appearance and how people have objectified her. So that's going to be interesting. It's the first episode of Pass the Mic, hosted by Peggy Kaczynski. Those of you who have seen the show in the past may remember that it was John Buffone and Melissa Barbieri who co-hosted that show. Well, now Peggy Kaczynski is taking over, and her first guest, Sarah Spain, we recorded it yesterday. It will premiere here at 8 a.m. Central tomorrow, and Sarah is just fantastic. I am such a fan of her and her work, and she has just made a really big impact in broadcasting just by being herself, just being, funny and kooky and provocative with her thoughts. So that's going to be a really good show. I highly recommend it. It's about 35 minutes long, so it's something you can catch in between a break at work or something like that. A lot of activity in the chat room. Everybody's waiting on Erik Kramer. We've got some storms here in Chicago, but I think that they're going to escape us, and we should be fine and not have any technical problems.
I feel like Ditka and Buddy Ryan before the fog landed in the second quarter in the playoff game. Like, please don't come down here.
Stephen Mee says, dump Dan and bring back Brandy. LOL.
Well, okay. I mean, I can't disagree with that.
Eduardo says, that seductive pose of Dan is making me question my heterosexuality. That's what I said, Eduardo. I saw that picture. God. I said, I haven't seen that. He's wearing all black. He's got the hand behind the head. He's looking seductively up at the camera. I have to pick this because that's what he's been thinking all day when he thinks about Erik Kramer being on the show.
Don't have Erik thinking that.
Yeah, really. Hey, before we bring in Erik, what's your biggest memory of him as a Chicago Bear? I know you ran out and bought his jersey. I've got that queued up to show him. But when you think back on his career, what stands out?
It's a hard question. I guess probably the 1995 season. I hate to give such a canned response, but man, I fell in love with Kramer going deep to Curtis Conway, and just Conway showing, because there were murmurs going into that 95 season that Conway was perhaps a bust,
right?
But it felt like Wani just kept the training wheels on him in 93 and 94, which is one of the things I was going to bring up to Erik to see what he thought about that. But yeah, Kramer throwing deep to Jeff Graham and Curtis Conway. I love that era of football. And it's so ironic that it's kind of like Jay Cutler in 2012, 2013. It's like when we get a good offense, our defense always sucks. And if we have a really good defense, the offense usually can't get it together. The one time that we had really good offense and really good defense, what happened? We won the Super Bowl. So not saying that would happen now, but I mean, of course, that team had Walter Payton, but still, when you're in the top 5 offensively and the best defense, they won it all. We can never get those things in symmetry anymore.
Right. Ravi asked, the question was, did Wannstedt have general manager controls? I think he gets a bad rap. Those rosters weren't all stocked up.
No, that's Mike McCaskey's era still.
Yeah, but the general manager was Harris, wasn't it? Was his name Harris? What the hell is his name? I'll look it up real quickly. But yeah, he did have a general manager.
You mean Mike Hatley?
Mike Hatley, that's who.
Or was it Mark Hatley?
Mark Hatley. Yeah. I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure that was his general manager. Let's go back here and look at history. Bears general managers. That's always difficult to find when you're looking for it quickly. Mark Hatley, 1997 is when he took over.
Well, that's when they went 4-12.
Yeah. Dave Wannstedt was the de facto general manager. Holy cow. I forgot about that.
Well, things were going well up until 97. I mean, well, Kramer broke his neck in 96 in week 4, ironically against Detroit. And like one of the things I wanted to ask him too is like, what if we'd have kept Steve Walsh there?
That's a great question.
Yeah, and because Walsh did so well in 94, winning 8 games as a starter and a playoff game. Maybe if you have Walsh in 96, you don't trade for Rick Meyer, a first-round pick, no less, going into 97 for a guy that was Rookie of the Year in 93 with Seattle. But by the time he comes to the Bears, he threw 0 touchdown passes as a Bear, and we gave up a first-round pick for him. And needless to say, by 98, he was gone. But they let Jeff Graham go. Now, granted, again, once more, Graham and Conway both came up as free agents at the same time. But still, well, Conway, they re-signed because he was at the last year of his deal, and Graham signed a 2-year deal when he left Pittsburgh. I'm just saying, if you keep Jeff Graham and you keep Steve Walsh, maybe the 96 team still is successful. Because you have to remember, the Bears defeated the reigning, defending Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football in week 1, and they smashed their asses. Yeah. Emmitt Smith had to stay 2 nights in a Lake Forest hospital. The Bears beat the shit out of Dallas that night. Not so much in the score, but just we're out physicaling them. And it was I think it was 22-6, something like that. Yeah. But yeah, the Bears had all this wow, now we've got Cox, we got a linebacker, and we're going to go to the Super Bowl. And then just the wheels fall off quickly.
Factor's got a great question. He asked, what Bears quarterback made you the most confident in Bears history? Looking back at Bears,
I would say Jim McMahon. I honestly thought in 88 when McMahon was going to start the championship game against San Francisco, I was saying things like, well, he's never lost to the 49ers. Hell, he's Jim McMahon. We're going back to the Super Bowl. But, but beyond Jim McMahon, I would say, I guess Cutler, which is probably stupid in hindsight, but because Jay only won 1 playoff game for us. But I just thought that this guy's got all the tools, man. He just needs, just a break, and he'll be able to show how talented he is. I need to listen to his podcast. I know that he's starting a podcast, and apparently he was with Adam Schefter today too.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. I saw Schefter tweeted that he talks about quarterbacks, I presume current day quarterbacks, but I don't know. I haven't listened. And he talks about he went in depth about all the stuff he had to do as a diabetic, right? A type 1 diabetic to play football. So I guess he had never really gone on the record and really spoken about those things before. He's always been a private person,
Exactly. Yeah. So it's surprising that he's doing a podcast and he's revealing so much of himself. It's pretty interesting. I was listening to ESPN 1000 and Waddle and Sylvie were saying that they were guests on Cutler's podcast, and they were saying that it was just so unusual how Jay did it. They're talking, and all of a sudden, Jay looks at his watch and says, "Hey, I think that's about it for now." It's really very, very casual and unlike most podcasts. But I'm looking forward to catching a couple of episodes of Jay's podcast, and maybe I can get you to be a guest on Jay Cutler's podcast.
I'm not worthy of that. But if there was some reason he would come down from the pedestal and show up on the Barroom Network would be pretty awesome.
Listen to some of the comments about Jay Cutler in the chat room. King Pookie Nation Alvarez says Cutler is a quitter. Stephen Me says,
that's bullshit. I mean, look, if he's referring to the championship game, come on, Aldo, you got to jump in on that. You can't let that go.
Well, I totally disagree with King Pookie.
Olin Kreutz said the guy couldn't stand. His whole leg was throbbing and shaking, and he tried, and he literally couldn't he could put 0 pounds of pressure on his knee.
Right.
And had the Bears still won, he would not have been able to play in the Super Bowl either. That's how hurt he was. He had a grade 2 tear of a ligament in his knee. So
anyone who thinks that he quit on that team during that moment is just wrong. He was really hurt. Cutler's problem was that he had terrible body language. He was a terrible leader. And when he left that game, he should have been alongside, shoulder to shoulder with his teammates on a crutch or whatever.
Well, he was trying to ride the bike to get loose again, though. Give him credit for that, too.
Yes, but they later in the game kind of caught him on the bench all by himself, looking sullen and so forth. And I think that's
he was probably depressed knowing that this was his moment and he's fucking hurt.
I totally agree with you. I hate to, and you and I talked about Erik Kramer on the sideline of a Bears game where he was lifted. I wasn't able to find out which game that is, but he was lifted, and while he was on the sideline, he was smiling. The cameras caught him smiling, and he received a lot of crap from the Chicago media, including the Score Sports Radio's. I think he was at the Score at the time. Dan McNeil had him on, and he chastised Kramer for smiling, which I thought was unfair because you just never know. He could be smiling because he's pissed off. That happens sometimes. He
could have said, "They think I'm bad. Wait till they see this fucking Meyer kid."
Mm-hmm.
They don't think I can win. Wait till they see Rick Meyer in there.
Stephen Me says Jay Cutler's an anti-vaxxer. He's a simpleton douchebag. We've got
they were anti-vaxxers before anti-vaxxing was cool. Like it's none of my business what they did with their kids, but I can remember Kristen Cavallari saying that she wouldn't get her kids vaccinated either, which again is none of my business whatsoever. But they did put that out there way before COVID that they wouldn't get their kids vaccinated.
That's right. And a lot of people who are anti-vaxxers are now saying, yeah, you should get the vax because this shit is getting out of control. But that's a topic for another day. Cutler was a bad teammate, says Bruce, Ollie, Walter, Jordan. And I think there's some people who will agree with you, Bruce, Ollie, Walter, Jordan, but there are some people who really like Jay. He had some offensive linemen.
Kyle Long
is a perfect example. Although lately, I think Kyle has been singing a different tune about Jay. I don't know what's going on. But it's a great question about which quarterback has given you confidence in the past. And I agree with you that Jim McMahon during that period of the 80s, it's just as heartbreaking that Jimmy couldn't stay healthy and didn't do the things necessary to stay healthy, like play smart. Because he could have had a much more prolific career. And
but then again, the fact that he played so reckless was part of the reason that he was a winner too. He was not afraid.
Yeah.
I know you could say that was dumb, but that was his charm as well, and why his entire offensive line loved him so much.
Mm-hmm. Funky Toad 08 says, please, no politics tonight.
No, there won't be. And Walter also loved Jim McMahon too, so that's also worth pointing out.
Absolutely. The other quarterback whose name I'd like to bring up, you see, we brought up Cutler, we brought up McMahon.
Please don't say Kyle Orton.
PJ in the chat says, I think that we should have built around Kyle Orton, have him be a game manager like he proved he could do in his first season. And I kind of agree with PJ. When we made the trade for Jay, I was a little disappointed that we gave up on Kyle Orton. Because
Not me.
Really? Tell me why.
Well, okay, let's rewind to 2005. What happens? He throws for 12 yards on a Sunday night game against Atlanta, and ultimately Rex is brought in the game because thank God he's healthy, gets 2 standing ovations, and in his first pass down the field to Musa Muhammad, eclipses 12 yards in one pass because Kyle Orton was Mr. Checkdown, Mr. I can't throw the ball. But to be fair, when Kyle went to Denver, he was slinging a rock a little bit. But in Chicago, he didn't try. By the time he gets to 2008, when he's back in there again, we had a win and in situation. And this is what got John Gruden fired initially in Tampa, was because we had to have Tampa Bay collapse. They had to lose like their last 3 or 4 straight games for the Bears to even potentially make the playoffs. And it happened. Tampa lost 3 or 4 games in a row, and all we had to do was beat the Texans. And Kyle Orton goes in there and just plays terribly in that Texans game. And guess what happens? We don't make the playoffs again because he just wasn't. Man, I like Grossman better than Orton. Orton couldn't throw the ball down the field. Yeah, he's a game manager, but God, we couldn't win the Super Bowl with that defense and not being able to score points. So, I mean, what makes you think we're going to be able to do it when the defense is a little bit older?
That's a good point. And maybe Erik Kramer can share his viewpoints on that, because guess who is joined us right now? It is indeed Mr. Erik Kramer. How are you, sir?
Fellas, I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent. Let me get this graphic fixed up here and get you on the line, get you hooked up here. Hold on a second. Let me clear this. There we go. Erik Kramer is with us. Erik Kramer, thank you very much for joining us. We have been looking forward to this since Dan and I have been working together. He's been saying, can you get Erik Kramer on? Can you get Erik Kramer on? And Dan is out east. He is joining us via telephone. Dan, say hello.
Mr. Kramer, sir, it is a privilege and an honor. And I hate to, I'm a 40-year-old man as I sit here now, but I'm still 13 when I'm talking to you. So if I'm a little fanboyish, I apologize.
We can deal with that. No problem, Dan. It could be worse. Could be the other side of the fence you're sitting on.
That's right.
I was a huge Erik Kramer guy. Like I told you in email, I bought your jersey, but this is none of my business, like what money you may have gotten. But I'm curious, in 1997, if a guy in West Virginia buys an Erik Kramer jersey, does the NFLPA slide him some money? Like, do you know that that's happening?
Every cent of it. Yep.
I love it.
No. I don't recall. I don't know how it works now, but back then it didn't. The players got none of that.
Oh, really?
So I'm figuring now that there's this college name, image, and likeness thing that some of that's shifted gears, I would say, in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
That's a guess of mine. I have no idea.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, just with people like Dan and myself buying Erik Kramer memorabilia, you should have had another extra couple $100,000 in the bank, I think.
Yeah. I think the way it worked back then was the NFL and the individual teams owned their uniforms. Mm-hmm. So I could do an Erik Kramer ad and not be in a uniform and not have to worry about it. But as long as that uniform was in the picture, that's where the money went.
There you go. Erik, we have so much to talk to you about. I think you and Dan have communicated a little bit via email, and he wants to delve into your playing career, but we also want to talk about what's happened after your NFL days. So we'd like to squeeze a lot in. And so what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dan, because Dan, as you will soon see, he has got a photographic memory of everything. I mean, you tell him a game and he'll tell you what color jersey you were wearing for that game. It's unbelievable. So Dan, take it away. I know you've been looking forward to this day for a long, long time. Go ahead and talk
Absolutely.
with Erik.
I'm going to bounce around. I wish I could stay chronological, but considering we don't know how long we'll have this interview, I want to ask some selfish questions that I've never known the answer to. One of the games I was recording for you today was the Bears at the Tennessee Oilers in 1998, which proved to be your final start as a Chicago Bear. And I never knew why. The Bears, it's the second part of that 4-12 debacle, back-to-back 4-12s, which is horrible for, I imagine, you as a player and for everyone involved. Mm-hmm. They lost so many games early that year by like 3 or 4 points. And then suddenly you've climbed out and you're 3-5. You've won 2 games in a row. You beat Dallas at Soldier Field. You go down there to Vanderbilt. You beat the Oilers. And then there's a bye. And somewhere through the middle of the bye, they're like, okay, Erik Kramer's out for the season. And, oh, by the way, Steve Stenstrom's going to be playing now. Steve Stenstrom, you're just like, oh, my God, the Bears won't win another game. So they never really said what happened. Could you share with me what happened? Like, why were you put on IR? Like, you finished the game. You look fine. You were happy. And then suddenly you're out for the year.
Well, so here's what happened. So several weeks prior to that, I think, didn't we play Arizona earlier that year?
Yes, that you threw a touchdown to Bobby Ingram, but that was the only score of that whole game, I believe.
So, right, it was out in Phoenix, and during that game, I tore a labrum in my right shoulder. So that's kind of like you also have one in your hip. And it's very akin to a rotator cuff. In fact, it's in that same little general area. And so it lingered, and it kept sort of getting worse week after week. But it was good enough to play with. And so that after that game, though, I had a really difficult time lifting my arm up. And it also, during that same year, several weeks earlier, I had torn some meniscus in my left knee. So that was why. And so both of those had kind of reached about as far as I could take them. And so I ended up having surgery that same day on both. And so it was, I was kind of like this with my right shoulder, so I couldn't move it for about I think 6 weeks or something. And then same with my left knee. So I couldn't put any weight on it for about the same amount of time. And so I was, I don't know what I did. I guess I was in a 2-story house. So I would kind of hop up, but then have to sort of scooch down on my butt to get down the stairs. And so walking was out of the question. And same thing with that right shoulder. I couldn't move it for a while. So there's the mystery solved.
I'm glad like I said, they never really explained or conveyed. I mean, your medical, problems at that time really are none of my business, but the Bears kind of just didn't. They just was like, oh, by the way, he's on IR. And I just was, as a fan, I was so like, I just thought for sure that the Bears are 3-5. They've won 2 in a row, and we're going to come back and shock the world. So it was so disheartening. And I know I've listened to your interviews since, like, you were on NFL Live a few years ago, and you did Dan Bernstein, you did Adam Carolla, and I've never heard you say anything bad about anybody other than maybe Andre Ware. But can you take this time just to placate me and tell me how bad Steve Stenstrom was? I'm kidding.
You're terrible, Dan.
No, serious. Next question, though. The Bears released you in like June of '99, I think it was. And I presume that's a salary cap move, but I know they had a new coach, Dick Duran. But ultimately that season, they just played Shane Matthews and squeezed in a little Cade McNown. Was there ever any potential for you to come back and at least come to camp in '99, or was it just a given that you were going to be gone?
Well, it might have been given to the Bears, but so that year in the offseason, as a result of those 2 surgeries that I just talked about, the rehab went on throughout, like it never ended. And part of that year I spent, part of that offseason I spent in Arizona, which they knew. And I was living with a friend of mine, Ryan Wetnight, and he was a tight end on that team, and he had an off-season house there in Scottsdale. And so I would stay there for, I'd say I was there probably, as I'm thinking back now, it's probably out there a good couple of months, and rehabbing with a guy that he had recommended, a guy named Mike Clark, and who worked with some other athletes, mostly baseball pitchers, I think. And so the Bears had me come in I think a day early before training camp. And back then we had training camp up in Platteville, Wisconsin. And I was told it was just to make sure I was healthy enough to play that season. So I'd gone through the whole off season. I couldn't practice, but I knew the whole offense, and Gary Croton had come in as the offense coordinator. And it was not that difficult to learn it. But so I came in, and I think it was Bobby Ingram they had me throw to that day. And apparently they filmed it. And I come in the next morning, and that's when Dick Duran and at that time the general manager, I think they called him that, was Mark Hatley. And so I'm sitting there in Dick Duran's office, and they're telling me I'm cut. And so that was the day before training camp. And so it's kind of a weird experience, but then I think it was either later that day or the next day, I was in San Diego with the then San Diego Chargers.
Yeah, and you had Jim Harbaugh there and Chris Penn there, and then
Right.
Jeff Graham was there, and pretty soon Curtis Conway would be there. It was like Chicago, all the Bears were going to the Chargers at that time.
Right. Remember there was a time where a lot of them were ended up in Green Bay, or end up in San Diego. So I don't know what the connection was there. Although I will say this, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback coach and offensive coordinator then was someone who had been with the Bears in a quality control position, Jeep Christ, Paul Christ's brother. So, in fact, Paul Christ was a tight end coach on that Charger team.
Cool. That's how everything works together like that. It's awesome. Hey, if you don't mind me bouncing around just a bit, I put this in the email, and you said you liked how I thought, but this is, and a lot of people would denigrate this idea, but as a fan, I honestly thought this could be true. And I'll tell you my theory and then ask you a question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So the 1994 team, for some reason, I felt like Wani just didn't really want to throw the ball yet. And again, this is just my theory as a fan. Like, it feels like Curtis Conway's not allowed to be Curtis Conway until 95. I don't know why that was. But in 94, they win the playoff game at Minnesota. That's great. Steve Walsh won 8 games. Credit to him. He wins the playoff game. But now you're going against San Francisco, whom you told me was the best team you ever faced. So they're stacked with Hall of Famers on both sides of the ball. Now, there's no way you're going to beat them dinking and dunking. So my philosophy, my theory has always been, if they were going to upset San Francisco that day, you start Erik Kramer, and let's come out with what we're going to do in 95 and track the hell out of them. Deion's going to probably play Jeff Graham at that point because he just had a big playoff game against Minnesota, and no one knows about Conway yet. So I think you can beat Eric Davis all day with Curtis Conway. And if they start to cover Conway, then you know what? Let's break out Tom Waddle because Wani hasn't used him all year either. And then like you said, you had Ryan Wetnight, great pass catching tight end. You got Marv Cook. You've got players. You can throw the ball. It just feels now. Are you better than Jerry Rice and John Taylor? Of course not. But still, you can at least be in the game, get some turnovers. I always thought if you'd have started the game that the Bears had a chance to win.
Like I said in the email, I like your way of thinking. However, the reality of it is that is on both sides of the ball. The best team I've ever seen. Not even close. So everyone thinks, well, it was just Deion Sanders. No, it wasn't. So they had Charles Haley in his prime. They had Charles Mann. They had Ricky Jackson. They had Gary Plummer. They were loaded everywhere on both sides of the ball. In fact, offensively, to me, if you took all 31 other teams offensively and you go, who would you rather have? Someone on someone else's, one of those other 31 teams, or the 49er guy? I'd take the 49er guy. So they were, remember Mike Shanahan was their offensive coordinator. And I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, you probably go back and look, but in the playoffs, I'm going to guess they had the widest margin. They scored the most points and gave up the fewest, I would say, in NFL history. That's a guess, but they were that good to me anyway. But I think that so defensively, what they would do and what they did was they would roll the coverage away from Dion. They'd let him go one-on-one. Everyone else on the field was playing 3-deep zone, but with the corner rolled up to that guy's side. So they figured your first guy is not going to catch a pass on Dion. The rest of your team's not going to catch a pass because we're all rolled in that direction anyway. And by the time you look past number one, you're sacked. So that's kind of their defensive philosophy then. And then offensively, to keep up with him, you'd have had to score 55.
Well, I was just hoping as a fan early on, the first thing that happened, I can't recall who fumbled, but the Bears got a turnover really early in the game, like maybe on San Francisco's first possession, but it only results in a Butler field goal. Maybe if you're in the game there, you throw a touchdown. I mean, remember, the Jets weren't supposed to play with the Colts either. They were 18-point underdogs in Super Bowl III. So
sure enough,
get some points, get some momentum. Maybe this could happen. Well, here's my next question that I kind of rambled on about it. Do you think, because you were there, is there any truth to what I was saying that it felt like by 95 suddenly you all were throwing the ball and you didn't do that in 94? Am I wrong? Did you try? It just felt like there was no going deep. And by open day against Minnesota the next year, Conway's just constantly going deep, and I loved it.
Well, I think that's a reflection of just we were better. I was better, quite honestly. I wasn't very good in 94. And I didn't know the offense all that well, honestly. And so, you know, through that off season, you might remember, but Dave Wannstedt opened up that competition, so it was going to be either me or Steve Walsh, and it just worked out where it was me. And then it was funny because back then, you know, fantasy football, at least I didn't know there was such a thing. And I'm warming up before a game. It was fairly early in the season, maybe I don't know when it was, maybe 4 or 5 games in, and we were doing pretty good offensively. And I remember warming up before the game, and a guy shouting at me to tell me to come over. So I'm like, what? And he's like, you and I are killing it this year. I'm like, in what? He's like, in fantasy football. I'm like, what the hell is fantasy football? So now that I kind of know what it is, I'm going to guess that nobody knew I was going to start. And so whoever did pick me up wouldn't have drafted me. And it would have been something, he had a guy go down at some point, and when I went to his lineup, and we just kept rolling on. So I'm guessing that's probably what he was talking about. Do
you recall how the Bears missed the playoffs that year? This is a source of mine that I've talked about on this air probably 50 times, but it's worth reiterating if you don't remember the circumstance.
I remember that we beat Philadelphia.
You got to beat Rodney Peete, by the way, your old nemesis, Detroit.
Right. And I think John Gruden was their offense coordinator then. Yeah. And I think somebody needed to win for us to get in, and then didn't. And I don't know who that was.
All right, let me tell you what happened. This still makes me sick. So the Bears win the game. You've won the game, and it's like, whew, you know, because the Bears had a lot of like weird turnovers that day. Things they kept shooting themselves in the foot, but you know, you prevail. And Atlanta had not beaten San Francisco in literally like 17 games, and they're hosting the reigning defending Super Bowl champions, a team you just said was the best you'd ever played.
Right.
And Jeff George was leading the Falcons that year and gets hurt. The 49ers hurt him. And it comes down to like a minute and a half to go. If San Francisco holds on, then you guys are going to Green Bay in the wild card, which I would have loved because both of those games in 95 were super tight.
Right.
So anyway, here we go. Who is the backup? If I recall correctly, this is a guy you were on maybe the Falcons replacement team with. Bobby Hebert comes in the game.
Okay.
He leads Atlanta with like a minute and a half to go, 80 to 90 yards. Terrence Mathis breaks like 3 tackles in the 49ers secondary and scores. And with like 30 seconds to go, they win the game. But they go the whole 80-some yards of Bobby Hebert. To this day, it makes me sick. The 49ers can't stop Bobby Hebert. Come on.
So here's how I know Bobby Hebert is that I didn't get drafted out of college. So I went to the Saints as a free agent, undrafted. That's when they had Bobby Hebert and a guy named Dave Wilson. So that's my connection to Bobby Hebert. Who barely
was the guy that knocked the 95 Bears out of the playoffs.
Bobby Hebert's from like cut off Louisiana or something.
Yeah.
And really good, nice, funny guy, but barely. It's like English was not his first language. It was the French. It was the French Louisiana in him.
Yeah.
I also have had a theory that because you hurt your neck, and ironically, again, against the Lions in 96 in the Silverdome in week 4.
Right.
And the Bears, we talked about this before you came on air, had beaten Dallas on Monday Night Football to open the season. You guys signed Brian Cox, who had played so well with the Dolphins, and it just felt like, okay, this team can do it, and then when you get hurt, I mean, Dave Craig did some really good things in the NFL, but most of them were in like 1983. So they bring in Dave Craig, who was got to be 40 years old at the time. My theory has always been, if they re-sign Jeff Graham and not let him go and keep Conway and Graham together, and then maybe when you go down, if they turn to Steve Walsh, because I don't even know if Steve Walsh ever played another down after he left the Bears. So if you keep Walsh there, and here's another part of my theory, if you keep Walsh, not only do the Bears make the playoffs with Graham and Walsh in 96, they don't have to trade for Rick Meyer, a first-round pick, no less, for a guy that's not even going to throw a touchdown as a Bear going into 97. Am I crazy?
Dan, connecting all the dots. I love it. I think you're right. With Jeff Graham, when they did not re-sign him, I don't know who made that decision, but it was obviously not the right one. Because there wasn't, in my experience of playing, I was never around a guy like that before, that he was such a professional that, and his body language, so to speak, was so easy to read that, and he was so good at getting the defender right where he wanted him, so that when prior to him breaking anywhere, you knew there was going to be separation by the time the ball got there. Every time. And so he was, in terms of the way he ran routes, there wasn't another guy like that. And he was fairly sizable too. He's probably 6'2", maybe a couple hundred pounds, and he just played physical. So I agree with you. I think that was a bad choice not to sign him back. And I think that was kind of the first domino to fall in the wrong direction. And you're right. They made some other pickups that were good, but that was a tough guy to replace. In fact, proved not to be replaceable. And you might be right about Steve Walsh. You might be right. That season probably could have been salvaged in some way.
I really need to get to your Lions days too, but I want to ask you again in your own words then with the Bears. So you barely missed the playoffs in 95. I mean, barely. Like I said, it comes down to like a half a minute to go in the game. I just told you what happened. Yeah. 94, you go to the second round of the playoff. 96, you hurt your neck, but they still finished 7-9. So it's not like they were awful.
Yeah.
What happened? How did those teams suddenly overnight? You're 4-12 the next 2 years. And by the way, before I shut up, I want to say one of my favorite games to this day is the game where you're in Miami. The Bears are 0-7. On Monday Night Football, not even supposed to be on Monday night, but the World Series bumped the game, and you're down like 18 in the fourth quarter, and you kept fighting, and you lead the Bears to a victory in overtime. Like, I literally cried when Jager made the field goal.
Yeah, that was fun. Although the other day I did an interview, I think it was a podcast or something, and the guy says, okay, Erik, what was your butt fumble? And I brought up that game, because I don't know if you remember this. It was we were going toward the end zone on the dirt baseball diamond area, and I lined up underneath the guard, Todd Perry. He's like, no, you belong one guy over. So, I think we ended up scoring on that drive, but that was you're right, and that was supposed to be a Sunday night game, but I think it has something to do with the World Series, and so we got bumped to Monday night. So it was 2 Monday night games that week.
Yeah, Green Bay played New England that same night too. But another game I want to acknowledge quickly, and then talk to you about your Detroit days. The '98 game. It just so happened that, like, for whatever reason, you come to the Bears and you lose all these games to Detroit. I mean, every game's close for the most part. And then finally, here they are in '98. The Bears are winless. Again, every game that they've lost was like, 17-12 at Pittsburgh,
right.
24-23 against Jacksonville opening day. And you just can't get a break. But here it is. Detroit's up 27-10 in the fourth quarter. And you come back and score 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. One of my favorite wins ever. And you scored a quarterback sneak to go ahead. That also, you had a touchdown to a guy named Fabian Bones. And I remember Edgar Bennett threw a touchdown that quarter as well. But the point is, the Lions were at 27-10, and you come back to win 31-27. I love it.
Anytime you beat a former team, that's always fun. And then I think I think that day in particular, because we were moving the ball early, we just couldn't score. And then we just kind of finally, things fell into place a little bit in the fourth quarter. And I can't remember why they weren't able to score, but obviously they didn't. And so we're able to come back and like you said, we kind of were snake bitten early in that year. And for some reason, things added up that day. And I had a few friends that had flown out from LA also for that game that were there. So it was kind of a fun day all around.
Yeah, and that broadcasting that game was a guy named Tim Ryan, who had done so many of the Bears games in the 80s for CBS. So just listening to Tim Ryan as a Bears fan is great. But shifting to the Lions quickly, just one of the things, and of course we need to touch on your Cowboy game, but one of the things that made me think like, oh, this guy's good, was the championship game when you're at RFK and everything starts out just terribly. I mean, like the first series, you get hit, you fumble, and Washington immediately scores. It's 7-0, and you haven't even had a chance to blink.
Right.
You get the ball back again, you throw an interception, they kick a field goal. It's 10-0, and it seems like there's a minute and a half off the game. But then, again, it takes some stones. What happens next? You go straight down the field and throw a touchdown to Willie Green. And to be able to overcome that adversity, RFK is a ruckus stadium. And on the road and all that pressure, and you've made these mistakes, and you come back and go to have the wherewithal to lead your team to a touchdown. I'm not placating you when I say this. Even as an 11-year-old boy watching, I was like, this guy's really good. What are your recollections of the championship game?
Well, it was a long day with not a lot of good things that happened. It was funny because when back in, I forget what year it was, but when Barry Sanders went in the Hall of Fame. So at that time, I was working with Fox, and one of them was a fantasy football show, by the way. And so I came in, I would come in, some of the things I would do while there is would come in and kind of preview upcoming games, or after Sunday, come back and go do the post game, wrap up stuff. So this was a day I happened to be down there, and I forget why, but one of the producers of the shows comes and says, "Hey, Barry Sanders is in the building right now. Would you go run up and see if you can get him to do a quick interview?" So I did, and then I got set up, and one of the questions Benji Kays had me ask him was, "Okay, Barry, let's think back to that NFC Championship game." And Benji had already given me these stats. He goes, "Now, I threw for 250 yards and a couple touchdowns. You ran for about 25 yards, and yet you're going in the Hall of Fame. I don't get it. So that was that team was, for at that time, at that year, they beat us by about 50 points the first game of the season as well, and then beat us about that same margin in the NFC Championship game. So they were very well put together offensively and defensively. And I just remember ripping that year. I don't know how many touchdowns he threw for, but all of them seemed to be over 50 yards. And I think he hit a couple against us roughly that same distance. So that was a tough, it was a lot of build up to that game because we'd gotten into Washington maybe, I don't know, at least 3 days or so before the game. And so there was a lot of build up. You can kind of feel what was going on there. And then it was disappointing to me that we came out and played, I think, so poorly. But all being said, it was nice to get there, too.
What goes through your head when you're down 10-0 so quickly? How do you rally yourself?
There's no way to score 5 touchdowns all in one drive. So you just kind of have to get back and go one play at a time and start keeping it simple and not really try to do anything too dramatic and just believe in what you're doing. So it was really, in any game, it's nothing more than that, even when things are going well.
It really felt like that was your year. As a Bears fan, I'd always hoped, and again, you were my, a nemesis at that juncture of my life, but I honestly thought if Harbaugh doesn't get picked against Dallas to lose, because the Bears are down 17-13. I talked to Tom Waddle about this, and he said he liked my theory as well. But Harbaugh gets picked. We're trailing by 4. Dallas goes on, and you shred them. And the thing I remember about that game more than any was that, like, the first 10, 12 plays are all Erik Kramer passes, and you're just connecting with everybody. Like, Barry's a decoy, but before we get back to that, just put a pen in that. I always thought, and again, this is selfish, me being a fanboy of the Bears, because if the Bears would have beaten Dallas, they would have come to the Silverdome. And that would have been your third time playing that year. I always thought the Bears, you wouldn't have thrown for 360 on the Bears, in my opinion. And so I always thought that the Bears, maybe they get past the Lions there. And that when they played Washington earlier that year, they just couldn't block Charles Mann. So if they could solve that, then maybe they get past Washington. They'd also played Buffalo earlier that season. Anyway, you got the point. I'd always hoped the 91 Bears could do something. But going back to your game against Dallas, I was watching it thinking, one more thing too. Wayne Fontes was celebrating on TV when you all clinched the division, when the 49ers are just beating the heck out of the Bears that day on Monday Night Football. So Ditka's really fired up to get revenge on the Lions. So that's a part of it I always thought that could come into play. But so here we go.
If you don't mind, let me back up on that one point, because nobody other than you ever brings that up. And I think, which was a great point, because you got Wayne Fontes pissing off certainly Ditka and the Bears by pulling out that cigar. And that kind of goes like nobody remembers that. And I'm not sure he remembers that, but I was, that seemed a little over the top in the wrong direction, if you ask me.
Yeah, it was.
But you came out and had the game of your life. I think it's fair to surmise that was your best NFL game under that pressure. And you couple that with the wave of momentum. I hate to say such a negative to turn into a positive, but that's just the way it played out with Mike Utley's injury. And it just felt like you all had the wings of destiny. It just felt like you just shredded the up-and-coming Cowboys, and now you're going to go and get to the Super Bowl. I mean, you had to think that this was your year, right, after you've just beaten Dallas. You had to, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Mike, because that was a tragic, obviously, still situation that he got paralyzed that game against the Rams, and I remember his, I didn't know he was hurt. And so he's getting wheeled off and gives the thumbs up. I didn't see any of that. And a bunch of us went to go see him. When I say a bunch, maybe 5 or 6 of us went to go see him in the hospital that next day. Is it the next day or day after? And, he was in surprisingly good spirits. But to this day, he's still paralyzed. And so,
Terrible.
And if you think back, I don't know how old Mike is, but I don't know what year he was drafted in, but let's just say it was 88 or 89. So at the time was 91. He might have been 25, 26 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So he's probably now been paralyzed longer in life than he wasn't. And yet he ends up marrying Danny, who was his therapist at the time. And the two of them together are two of the best people I've ever met in my life. And Mike they now built a house in St. George, Utah, which is a couple hours drive from Las Vegas. And so he's hooked up with Raiders tickets. And he said Mark Davis was unbelievable in constructing his seats and the special made chair they'll have for him. And so I'm just so happy that for him, he's nearly not made it as soon as recently as maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And he went through some major surgeries to get through all that. But I guess I bring that up because it wasn't just Mike. After that season, you might remember Erik died. Erik was another really good player and was about to go bass fishing one morning and decided to cut his grass in one of those riding lawnmowers. And he lived out on a rural highway down in Louisiana, and an 18-wheeler swerved off the road and hit him. That was a team that, as good as we were, there was some tragedy around it too. And but I'd say talent-wise, that team was just top to bottom, I think the best talented team I've ever played on. And I think that a lot of people might not know this, but one of the main guys that put all that roster together was a guy named Kevin Colbert, who's now and has been the GM in Pittsburgh for an awful long time.
You were talking about the talent. The guy that didn't even see the field that year, who ended up just being great and people forget about him, was Herman Moore.
Mm.
And he wasn't even on the field. Like, that guy beat the Bears at the fade route in the corner in the end zone just repeatedly for the next decade.
Well,
one thing I wanted to bring up about you too.
Yeah, and Herman went to Virginia, and he was a high jumper too in college, I believe. But when he first came to the Lions, I don't remember if this was in the off season or in training camp, but he had a real problem catching the ball, which I also heard Jerry Rice went through his first year. And but obviously they wanted to get Herman glass. They were trying to test him for everything. Well, I think it was just a matter of him getting acclimated, and he finally did. And obviously he was a 100+ catch receiver for many years. And another very talented guy who I think was maybe 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", incredibly long arms, like Inspector Gadget arms. And the guy was a smooth route runner and very talented. Yeah, good player.
2 more Lions things for you. The first question is obvious. So you start 12, 13 games plus the 2 in the playoffs in 91. I'm not disparaging Rodney Peete when I say this. I'm truly not. But didn't you earn the chance in 92? Like, why is 92? Why are you on the bench?
Well, it wasn't just Rodney I was behind. I was behind Andre Ware too. So I didn't get a phone call or anything. We showed up at a mini camp, and it wasn't like Wayne Fontes ever came and said, "Hey, Erik, here's how we're going to work things." So I was as shocked as anybody. And but also I wasn't as shocked because at that time, that's kind of how Wayne operated. And he wasn't always the most clear, I think, probably to himself, or whatever he spoke about or addressed within the team wasn't always clear to any of us either. So I guess it was sort of par for the course, so to speak.
coming into 93, I don't even remember if you played in 92, but in 93, you get in at the end of the year. The Bears, of course, are 7-5 and lose their last 4 games. And ironically, it would be Erik Kramer in week 16, or I guess it was week 17, because that's the only year they had 18 weeks before now, because you had 2 byes that year. But you put the Bears out at Soldier Field, and then people may forget you let a drive that was going to beat the Packers in a wild card game that was just great. And then, of course, with like 20 seconds to go, Favre hits Sterling Sharp and changes the narrative. But you had done it again. You led the Lions down and won another playoff game, but their defense couldn't stop Brett at the end. What are your recollections of that?
Well, that game against the Packers, I think I threw 2 interceptions in that game, one of which it was either late in the third quarter or early in the fourth quarter. I think we were already up by 10 points. And this probably, knowing that they have Favre, you never think it's over. But this would have certainly put at least one nail in the coffin. And Ty Halleck is playing tight end. And he turns out on what's called a little stick route. And there's somebody out in front of him. So he rightly pulls it up. And right as I throw it, the ball goes right over his, or just outside of his shoulder, and hits George Teague standing right behind him, who then takes it about 106 or so yards for a touchdown. And we came back and scored the next series, but because I was the last guy that had a shot at George Teague, and as I dove and missed, I'm thinking, what the hell did I just do? and so that's about as low as I've ever felt. But again, we did come back and score again, but apparently it wasn't enough. But I'll say this: prior to the Bear game that year, I don't know if it was a week before, or a couple weeks before, we played San Francisco, and again, we won a few games in a row, and they were just being the 49ers. We played them in Detroit or in Pontiac, and they rolled off the bus, and I think Steve Young, his first pass nearly got picked off. Second pass was a run that went for no gain. Third pass was a dig route to John Taylor for a touchdown. And it was 5 straight touchdowns in the first half. They didn't punt the entire game. And it was 35-10. We moved the ball up and down field too. We just didn't score. But at halftime, that game was over. And that's the best offense just for a long stretch that I've ever seen.
Well, after that year, you're going to sign with the Bears. Was it at the time? I mean, again, not to get in your personal business. Was it you wanted to come for the money, or just for the fact that the Bears were like, "Hey, you're our guy"? Because in Detroit, you didn't have that. I mean, you probably would have been behind Rodney Pete. Well, actually, they signed Scott Mitchell that offseason.
Right. In high school, I didn't start. It took me my first year out of high school. I went to Pierce College. And I was selling Valley Cable Television door to door, going part-time to Pierce. Oh. And then I was a backup the next year, and it was like unofficially my third year at Pierce College before I really got to start. So then I get recruited at NC State and a few other ones. And in fact, I got recruited by Pitt, where Ron Turner was. So this is after the 1984 season. So 10 years later, 1994, Ron Turner again is now at the Bears. And so I remember at the time I was married, and I remember Dave Wanstedt and Ron both picking Marshawn and I up at the airport. And I think we went to Gibson's. I'm not sure if we went to the hotel first, but went to Gibson's that night. And then the next night, I think we were at the top of the Hancock building. I think it's called the Signature Room, where you can see out over the town of Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I remember going back to the hotel. Now, no money was talked about or anything, but I remember going back to the hotel and literally jumping on top of the bed going, I cannot believe what's going on right now. So like I said, and even when I got recruited at NC State, they still recruited a couple other junior college quarterbacks. So this was the first time anyone ever said, "Hey, you're the guy." And it just so happened it was the Bears, and I was probably 30 years old at the time, 29.
Did you keep like one of the souvenirs that I always tried to buy? Everyone else thinks it was ugly, but me. I loved the 1920 throwback jersey that you all were wearing that year. Even though every time the Bears wore them, they got blown out. But did you keep any of like your jerseys or anything like that?
Yeah, I kept all my jerseys, even going all the way back to high school. They're sitting in a Tupperware box somewhere in the garage. But yeah, I've got them. I've got that one too. And you're right. I think I think the people that told you, I didn't really get the reason for them. They didn't really look like much to me, but we had to wear them that year.
I got to tell you, Erik, that Dan has your Erik Kramer jersey readily handy so that he can send me pictures of it. And that's one of many Chicago Bears quarterbacks jerseys that he owns, but probably the one he likes best. Am I correct?
That was the first jersey that I ever bought because it was harder to buy gear in 1997. You didn't have the NFL shop. You couldn't just put it up on your phone. Right.
Well, so interesting point is that I'm now a Chargers season ticket holder for the first time. And we went to the Chargers just this past weekend played San Francisco. And it was not a sellout, but there was, for every Charger fan there had to be 50 San Francisco 49er jerseys. So the entire stadium was nearly red, which if it was me, I wouldn't have let him in.
I've got one more softball for you. Actually, two more, and we want to talk about everything else that's happened in your life. And I appreciate you so much. One more jersey question. This is a meatball fan question. Aldo and I, for years, have been trying to get the Bears to wear white on white again on the road. Who makes the decision on whether or not the Bears, like, say, wear the navy pants or the white pants? Who makes that call? Does anybody know? I asked the beat writers, and they're like, I don't know. I'm just curious. Who makes that call?
I remember we wore white on white one year against the Lions, and that was the players decided to do that. So today, who decides? I have no idea. But I suppose if the players wanted to do whatever they wanted to and were vocal enough about it as a group, I think they could probably get done whatever they wanted to.
Last softball for you. I remember, and I haven't seen it in 20 years or plus, but could you tell me?
I'm sorry, Dan, you kind of cut out.
Lose him?
No. Erik, did you hear the question from Dan?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I'm sorry. We lost our signal there momentarily. Dan asked your recollection of being on the television show Married with Children with Raymond Harris. And who was the other guy that was on
Curtis
there?
Conway.
Curtis Conway, yes.
Yeah, it's funny because that was first of all, back when I was playing in Canada in the off season, I lived in a triplex on Overland Boulevard, Overland Boulevard, right behind the Overland Cafe. It was a tiny little triplex. At the end of that street was a Fox Studios, which is where Married Children was filmed. So all those years later, which really weren't that many, there I was. And I remember that day was how great what's his real name? What's his name in real life? The guy that plays Al Bundy. What is it?
O'Neill.
Ed
O'Neill.
Yeah.
How hilarious that dude is. Nonstop acting hilarious. Like the camera to him is never off. And so whenever they would want a scene where I don't know if you remember the premise of that show, but Al sold his soul to the devil to be in the Super Bowl. And the guy who played the devil was the guy who played Freddy Krueger. And so along the way, Al's, of course, having this great, unbelievable season. And so I don't know if any of this made its way on to the show itself, but he's like posing with different women that are all over him in these ads, and whatever face they want him to make, it's just on point. Boom, 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 boom. It was just awesome. And just to kind of hang out and talk with him, I didn't know this, but he played football in college somewhere in the Midwest, and would at spring break would go down to Myrtle Beach, which I went to NC State. That's where that whole part of the country would go. So it's kind of cool hanging out just on that set and hanging out and talking to everybody. And I remember most of it, or at least part of the day, the three of us were sitting up in the rafters, just kind of watching them, kind of pull the set together to make whatever part of the deal they were making for the set. So it was a fun day. It was a fun day.
One more football question, Eric, and I know Aldo's like, come on, Dan, shut up. But I do have to, if you were the coach of the Chicago Bears in 2021, and I think you came to the first preseason game.
I did.
Are you going to start the kid, or are you starting Mr. Dalton? All of us want to start Fields.
Yeah, I would too. But you and I and Aldo, our jobs aren't on the line. And so when the fans all want Justin Fields, the fans don't get fired when Justin Fields shows up and throws 5 interceptions. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace do. And so not to say that at some point in time, which everybody I think is angling for, okay, it's at some point in the season, it looks like Justin Fields is going to be in there. And I agree with you. But I'm not so sure. I came away with this last weekend, the game following the Bills, thinking, does the guy who wins this job really win? Because you got to play behind that offensive line right now. And until they get that whole thing figured out, and I know Jason, Peters, is now newly arrived, and I guess they have another guy that's still not quite active yet. So hopefully those issues on the offensive line will be solved. But obviously Justin Fields has some ability to get outside the pocket. But you remember he took a wicked hit in that game too. And so, I think they can see the talent there that Justin Fields has, as can everybody. My thing, I was hoping to see what I didn't know that I would see that I so far have is an ability by him, of him, to be able to kind of move through the progression with his feet and eyes not getting confused. You know what I mean? Like there's not really a pause or delay in how he goes from number 1 to 2 to 3. And so that tells me he's reading the coverages. He's not just looking for a guy, and then when he's covered, then the next guy, because it doesn't work that way. And so I think what I've seen so far, and I'm seeing Aldo nod his head too, is that he looks the part, not just physically, but the way he carries himself, the fluidity with which he does play and execute. I think the Bears, for now, the first time in quite a while, I think have a guy that's going to be there doing a good job for a while.
We've got a few questions from the chat room. And I got to tell you, Eric, when Dan and I do this show every Tuesday night, we get a really surly bunch of people in the chat room. I mean, they're complaining about this, they're complaining about that. But tonight in the chat room, it's a love affair with Erik Kramer. So many wonderful and kind thoughts thrown your way. And they've got a few questions that I'd like to get in before we get to our next topic.
Let's do it.
First of all, Ravi asked, would you be willing to come back to Chicago if the Bears invited you, like for, say, a Erik Kramer Day or to celebrate the 90s football teams? What's your relationship like with the Chicago Bears organization?
It's great. I love coming back. I usually come every year for the Bears alumni golf outing. So and this year, obviously, 2020, they didn't have it. Due to COVID. This year's got pushed back to the weekend I came for the Dolphin game. So I came in Friday, went to the game Saturday. We hung out downtown Sunday, and then Monday was the golf outing. So I'll always come back for that. And then I'd say more times than not, I'll come back. Like this year, the Bears alumni game weekend is the Halloween weekend where they play, who is it? I can't remember the game, but they're playing on Halloween, but there's something else going on Saturday as well. So yeah, it's very likely I'll come back for that.
Fantastic.
And they don't have to have an Erik Kramer day for me to come back, by the way.
Great.
I
Swanky.
just like coming back to Chicago because the town's so great, the restaurants are awesome, and it's just always a good time.
Yeah, it's a great city, and you've got a lot of fans here. Swanky wants to know if you know and have any contact with some of the guys that played college football at North Carolina State, like Phillip Rivers.
You know, I don't know Phillip. I came back and I saw a couple of games that he played in while there. Same with Mike Glennon. There was a game that there's some friends that I had that lived down in Nashville area, and one of them came up. I don't know if you remember this game, but Mike Glennon was the quarterback at NC State the year Jameis Winston was at Florida State and ranked number 1. And so I flew out there. My friend Dan flew up, and we went to that game. And then we went down and had a little golf weekend that sort of got rained out down in the Pine Needles area, and where Pinehurst is. But yeah, I keep tabs on people. I don't know a whole bunch of them. I've never met Russell Wilson, but the quarterback coach my first year at NC State, Dana Bible, had gone, once he left NC State, had come back and was on Tom O'Brien's staff when Russell Wilson was there. But I don't know an awful lot of those guys. Obviously, there's a lot of guys in the pros now that went there. And I keep up on who's who. I just don't know a bunch of them personally.
Did you get to meet Coach Valvano when you were there?
Yeah. Yep.
Man,
And
each at the ESPYs made me cry, man.
Just a thought.
as it did a lot of people, for sure. And yeah, he obviously made his mark there. And that was, I remember watching that 83 championship, not just a championship game, but the tournament itself, in which they damn near lost to Pepperdine in the first round in 2 or 3 overtimes. And then it was someone else just as small in another couple of overtimes that they just squeaked over. And Terry Gannon was like the sharp shooting guard on that team amongst a few others. And like the fact that they beat Houston, who is the only school to have 2 dream teamers on it. You know, had it not been for the 1980 U.S. over the Russians, that probably would have been the best upset in sports history, not just basketball history.
Stephen Me has a double part question here. His first one is, you know, we saw Mitchell Trubisky come to Soldier Field and have kind of a, so to speak, revenge game against the Bears. And so he wonders, when you played with the Bears against Detroit, did you ever have your kind of revenge game against the Lions?
I don't know. I didn't go into it with that mentality at all. I literally try to take every game, I don't care who it was, and just take the way I would prepare for one week, Monday through Saturday, the same way as the next week. And whatever happened on Sunday was just the culmination of whatever work went into it that week. But no, I didn't really pinpoint like, you know, oh, we got the Lions coming up, so I got them circled. I didn't really think of it that way.
I love that mentality in professional athletes. You shouldn't treat any opponent more differently than another opponent. You should always be at 100%. You want to win and try your very best, no matter who it is. Stephen's other part of the question is because he's from Dublin, and he asked if you remember the preseason game in Dublin, 1997 versus the Steelers.
Of course, yeah. Went to the one of my first stops there was the Guinness factory. And as it was for a lot of people, but it was great to have, you know, you got 2 Irish Catholic team owners in Dublin, the home of the Irish Catholics. And just what a great experience that was. And I can't remember who won or lost, but I just think I was fortunate enough to not only make that trip, but I think if I remember right, we after the game, we went to the airport to fly home, and there was some delay where I think we were about 8 hours late taking off, something like that. And when I was with the Lions for the 92 preseason, we went to London and played the Cowboys. And when I was with the Chargers, we went to somewhere in Australia. I think it was, Sydney, and played. Hell, I forget who it was we played over there. But, yeah, I got to travel around a little bit, and that was fun. And anytime you go somewhere, kind of that's outside the United States, it's kind of a big deal. So to get out and play a few of those games in other places was fun, a lot of fun. Obviously, you're not sightseeing the whole trip. You're practicing, and I remember going to London, and because I think we left, I want to say at night, right? And so you were going back in time, so flying east, and I remember getting there sometime the next day, and the big thing was, don't go to sleep. Wait till your normal bedtime hour to go to sleep. And I remember falling asleep for what was going to be about a 20-minute nap, and it ended up being like 10 hours. And so my schedule was every night not going to bed, and it was Benny Hill all night long on TV, and then I'd wake up, I'd get maybe an hour's sleep, go practice, and repeat that whole cycle every day for like a week. So it was, the time difference, it was tough. That's why I think if the NFL does get an international franchise, and it does happen to be London, that's going to be difficult, I think, unless you were to go to London. But who else are you going to play besides London? So you almost have to have like 4 franchises over in Europe to make it doable. Because what if you're on the West Coast here?
Oh gosh,
flying to London, then got to go back, and they got to play a next game. Are you going to be at home, or they're on the road, or? But at the NFL, they're always good at figuring stuff like that out.
Yeah. Well, the Bears made a big mistake in the 2019 season when they went out 2 days before their game in London against the Raiders. And John Gruden had that Raiders team out there from Monday on. So they got acclimated to the time, and the Raiders really handed it to the Chicago Bears. But that's another story. A lot of questions in the chat regarding your broadcast career. We know that you've done broadcasting in the past. People want to know, are you doing anything now? Do you have plans to do anything in the future? Because you're getting a lot of compliments on your recall and your how you articulate about the game.
Well, that's nice. It's good to hear, and I love doing it. And so, no, I have no plans, although I would love to. A couple years ago, someone I got to know not too long before that happened to ask me. He's a local radio guy here in LA, Bob Brill, and asked me would I like to do a fantasy football podcast. So for the last couple of years, I think it turned into a video cast this last year. But we cover in the off season. We cover what other people do too. The teams sort of comings and goings in the off season with draft and free agency, and kind of predictions on to next year. We'll have a guy that may be covering the team, or in one case, I think we got Lee Steinberg, the agent Lee Steinberg, and so yeah, it's a fun thing to do. I wish, I was just getting to that point prior to Griffin passing away, when Fox had just offered me sort of a half season with a guy named Tom Brenneman, and I would have loved to have done that, but just sort of life kind of hit the skids there for a little while.
Yeah. Well, we're going to just about ready to get to that. Boy, we got a lot of great questions. Maybe we'll have you back on soon. By the way, Dan and I have been looking for a podcast partner too, so maybe we should maybe we can beg you to at least come back. But I got a really good question here that acts as a segue. It's not really a question, it's more of a statement. Harp 4803 says, support Erik's efforts in changing conservatorship laws, eliminate the bureaucracy of protecting abusive guardians. The incapacitated deserve honest people handling their affairs. Thank you for that, Harp. Erik, why don't we start talking about what's transpired after your playing career, and you went through some adversity. Dan's going to handle this part of the interview as well, so I'll kind of throw it over to Dan, but perhaps you'd like to maybe issue kind of an opening statement to get us to that part of this interview.
Yeah, sure. So here's kind of the Cliff Notes version, and the way I can. Let me first say that the reason I can say this isn't a Cliff Notes version is because it's now some time has passed. But back in my older son Griffin was born in 1993. By the time he was in like his 8th or 9th grade year of school, some of his more pronounced difficulties, behavioral, and the way he communicated to people within his family and outside as well. He started to really be difficult. He himself, through really no fault of his own, had some brain deficiencies that did not allow him to learn or process information like, say, you and I would. And ultimately that led him to the culture of friends, along with Griffin, were drinking and doing drugs, and that escalated to a point where he went to drug rehab in about the middle of his 10th grade high school season or year. And so he, about between inpatient and outpatient, I'd say there was probably about 15, 16 months in there where he went from not wanting to be there at all to slowly but surely coming around, where he started to get a little insightful, not only of who was around him, but even within himself. Then towards the end of the outpatient deal, he, along the way, he wasn't, they had this outpatient program. Part of the day was spent in a school atmosphere, not school in the traditional sense, but there was a teacher or two that was kind of led the whole thing and would work individually with all the kids. And so Griffin, for the first time in his life, began believing in himself scholastically, and started to talk about, hey, asking me, do I think that the coach I played for in junior college would allow Griffin to go to that school? Of course he would. And so this was on a night. This was the night after a football game that I picked him up and dropped him off at his mom's house. And it was the first time in his life that he'd been talking about the future in any way. And it was about 2 days. It was 2 days later, 2 mornings later, I got a phone call from the sheriff's department that to come down and see. And what I came down to see was that he'd passed away. And it was a drug overdose. And so there's a whole story behind that that's not really worth getting into at this point. But personally, not long after he passed away, my mom did, about 8 months later. And then around the time she passed away, my dad contracted esophageal cancer from some untreated acid reflux. And that was a very slow, steady terminal decline as well. And this all happened when all of this was going on while I was broadcasting and coaching, a bunch of quarterbacks and receivers. In fact, Curtis Conway and I did this for quite a few years together. And then I started working with some college guys that were getting ready for the pros. I forget how this happened, but I think an agent or two called me, and soon enough I was working with probably 5 or 6 guys getting ready for the draft. In fact, one of them is the quarterback coach for the Kansas City Chiefs now, Mike Kafka.
Okay.
And he got drafted by Andy Reid when he was in Philadelphia.
Right.
Anyway, so broadcasting was going on. That was going on. And the coaching, I both coached Griffin and Dylan in youth football, but that had just ended. It was Dylan's season had just ended, and when Griffin passed away. And so then, as I said, my mom, she had, prior to Griffin passing away, though, it was a Mother's Day, actually the day after Mother's Day that very year, she found out she had stage 4 uterine cancer. Mm-hmm. And so she survived just a lethal surgery where they removed a lot. And so she somehow survived that, only to 8 months later pass away. And so there was kind of a rough time there where, for me, it felt like everybody was going, nobody was coming.
Yeah.
And so, that led me to a serious bout of depression, to the point where in August of 2015, I actually shot myself and in the head, underneath the chin, and with the intention of not being here. And so as I look back now, everything I didn't have to live for, I now have to live for. And so it was just a period of time where life was tough. And it was, once you get down, what my experience is, once I got down that low, it didn't feel like it was ever going to end, and unless I ended it. And so that's what I did. And fortunately, my plan didn't work out too well. And so now I'm getting to live what I wouldn't have gotten to live had what I planned turned out to be, an unfortunate term, successful.
And everyone immediately thought that this was perhaps CTE related, because we've been hearing a lot about that. And during that period where that happened, I was friends with Dave Durison, and that was tough for all of us to learn about and experience his loss. Was your depression at all related to your playing career and the hits to the head?
I'm not going to say that it wasn't. It's just that in the experience that I had, I never woke up with headaches. I never was in a room that I just entered not knowing why I'm there. I've never lost my way home. All these things I just described are things that I've heard people like Dave and others went through. But I can't rule it out, because if you talk to Dylan, my son, that's what he thinks. And so who am I to argue? I'm just saying that, when you look back, like now, I don't feel depressed now. It's hard for me to connect with who I was at that point. Because it honestly, it kind of, as I look back, I had taken a golf trip to Ireland with some friends earlier that spring. Mm-hmm. And even though it was fun being back in Ireland, I still, in the morning or at night, when I ended up back in my room by myself, those weren't fun times either. And so I think this had kind of crept up over time, and it was here before I knew it. And once my experience, because it wasn't the first time I'd ever been depressed, and over time my experience was, here it is. Mm-hmm. It could be just driving a car, and it's this little thing that bubbles up, and once it bubbles up, it doesn't go away. Right. And so whether it was related to CTE, obviously we'll never know. I'll bet you when I'm gone and they crack this open, there's going to be some CTE evidence in there. I pretty much guarantee it.
Do you think, Erik, sir, I don't want to be dark, but
That's
the
okay.
catalyst for everything
Let's
bad
just,
happened with you?
I'll tell you the way I tell everybody, my friends, whoever. Like, there's nothing you could bring up that's hard for me to talk about. Nothing.
Do you think then that your son's death was the catalyst for everything that happened? In other words, like, let's say you still went through a divorce and both your parents passed away. Do you think if your son had lived, that would have been enough for you to overcome your adversity, in the sense that that wouldn't have led to the incident with the gun? Because perhaps then you're watching him play college ball and you feel like you're living vicariously through him. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think there's a chance, had he not passed away, that none of this other stuff would have even happened?
We'll never know, but very possibly. Like when he died, in the morning, the steps that I walked up and found out what happened, and the house that I went to where he was, and telling Dylan, and just everything that transpired, that was the saddest I'd ever been in my entire life. But even that wasn't depression. I remember my sister drove out from the Vegas area, and friends of mine that lived across the country came out and stayed just to be around. People, friends and family that I knew, they were just so much so that the parents on Griffin's football team would literally right here bring those stainless steel big things that you put the burner underneath, full of food all day long, every day, because there was like a constant stream of people in and out. And so I'm guessing everybody recognized how sad of a time that was. So had Griffin not passed away, would everything else have happened that I did? I don't know. I doubt it, because when your parents pass away, it sort of falls in line with the natural progression of life, right? Not so when it's your kids. And so you kind of have to learn how to deal with that. And I remember there was a grief, I think they call it grief council, grief share, basically. So it's all these people that, it was at a local church, all these people that had lost someone or another in their lives. It could be parents, grandparents, friends. I was the only one that had lost a son or a child. And even though he was 18, it didn't matter. It was kind of like his life literally was just getting started in a way. And so I don't know how to answer that other than to say that we'll never know. But I doubt that I would have felt as low as I did if Griffin had not passed away.
I remember watching your interview with NFL Live. At the time, like, you still had to have another surgery, I think, on your jaw and your tongue as well. Like, you could tell your speech had been affected again at the time. But you were still talking, but obviously it still took you a couple of years to be you again. So when does the Courtney lady, how does she exploit you? We know she exploits you, but how does she enter the picture?
The way she entered the picture initially was she's the sister of somebody at that time who was a good friend of mine. I will say he's no longer, but So I had met Courtney in life, I think on 2 occasions. One where my wife back then, when Griffin was alive, and I'm not even sure we had kids back then, but her brother and her brother's wife, and I'm not even sure if they had kids back then either, had his wife Sue had a Christmas party, and it was only 2 other couples other than them, Marshawn and I, and Courtney and her then husband. And that's the first time I'd ever met her. I don't remember a thing about that night other than that. And then there was another time when my then wife, Marshawn, had a flower shop. And I come over I forget what it was, but as I'm coming in, there's Courtney either there or had just pulled up on a bike she was riding, because her brother did not live far from that flower shop. So there was really 2 instances that I met Courtney ahead of time. And when Griffin passed away, he passed away on October 30th, 2011. My birthday is November 6th. And so if you remember the situation I described to you where the house was kind of full of people, Courtney waited until there was nobody around, and she showed up on a weekend day. And how she knew it was my birthday around that time, I don't know, but she did. And so that's kind of how I got introduced to Courtney. And then from there, it was just, one of the things that I was conflicted about back then was that Griffin, prior to his passing, had decided to live with his mom full time, because prior to that we were separated, and both he and Dylan would spend part of the week with me and part of the week with Marshawn. And Griffin at one point decided he just wanted to go live with Marshawn. And so when he died, he and I didn't have really much contact, not from my doing, but from his. And so I wasn't, I guess, with the shock of him dying, one part of me wasn't quite sure if he knew how much I loved him when he died. And one of the things Courtney pointed out was that she, unbeknownst to me, would take Griffin to some AA meetings as requested by Marshawn, because apparently Courtney had some drug issues in the past herself. So that's how, she convinced me that, oh, no, we used to talk about you, and Griffin used to bring you up, and he would say how much that he loved you and vice versa. So that's kind of how Courtney and I at least went from the stage of sort of acquaintance / budding friends, I guess you'd say. And then it eventually turned into somewhat of a relationship. But what I came to find out was how difficult she was to get along with. And so it was sort of an on again, off again, probably more off than on. And eventually I broke up with her for the last time in early January 2015. And so by the time I had my accident, she was gone forever by that point. And so the way she and I reacquainted was told to me. I don't remember it. And so a friend of mine from high school, Anna Durgan, at one point, she basically orchestrated all of my rehab, all of my recovery, whether it was whatever hospital I was at or the brain treatment center I was at that followed. She was on top of everything all day, every day. And so there was a time when my insurance, the residential part of my insurance, so CNS was a rehab facility on its own, and you go there from I think like 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. And then they also had 2 houses where some of us, which included me, I lived at one of those houses. And so I didn't drive. And so I would be shuttled like all the rest in a van. So it was like a 24-hour day, 7-day a week under their care. The residential part of my insurance ran out toward the end of 2015. So Anna took it upon herself to find me a place in Nevada where my sister lived so that I could live with my sister and her family and then go to this place called Nevada Community Enrichment Program, which was a brain rehab center. And so prior to going there for 2 weeks that I don't remember, Anna lived with me and would take me over to CNS in Encino, which is about a 30-minute drive, go on to Santa Monica, where she was working at that time, come back, pick me up in the afternoon, take me back home. And that went on for 2 weeks. And then not long before we went to Las Vegas, she does everything I just described, and then was also at the same time taking an accounting class even further across town. So she comes back after doing everything I just said, then goes to the accounting class, then comes back to my house, and who's there at the front at the kitchen table with me? Courtney. And so I don't know how she got there or who, I have no idea. So, and then apparently she came again the morning we left. Don't have any recollection of that either. Mm-hmm. And then apparently throughout my stay there, she was constantly calling and texting me. Don't have any recollection of that either. But she eventually flew out and drove me home in my car, which is a 4.5-hour drive or so from the Las Vegas area. So I'm going to guess that during that drive, or probably even before then, she assessed me pretty well that I would be vulnerable. And so
so you think the whole time she had an ulterior motive or was just duplicitous? Was there ever any part of her that legitimately maybe did care about you from the previous relationship and wanted you to be well, or it was just the whole thing was like, nah, I got him where I want him?
I wish I could believe the former, but no, this was a strategic, diabolical plan on her part that included nothing more than theft. That's all it included. It was to the point where when Griffin passed away, literally, I don't know how many, but there was a lot of people that donated money for him. And so she wiped out that $10,000. And as I told you, she knew Griffin. So I don't think there was much internally inside of her that cared much about anything. And now remember, she had a daughter all that time too. It's obviously still does. So like, you know, part of her theft was in the initial stages of it is that after we had broken up, Courtney got arrested for forging a doctor's signature for a prescription. And all they gave her was probation. And so she paid off 3 months into her probation. She began paying off her restitution with stolen funds from me. So, and ended up applying for an expungement, which she received, even though to get the expungement, she had to sign a document that said, during the course of this probation, you've broken no laws. Well, the only laws she broke were during probation. She forged checks. She stole $300,000, 10,000 of which was Griffin's. Identity theft, dependent adult abuse. The dependent adult abuse is when you steal from somebody who mentally cannot defend themselves. That's the definition of what she did. So if you're trying to make this into a romantic situation, that didn't happen. She assessed me up and down enough to know that I had forgotten we were broken up. Courtney Baird was down, like a part of my life that at one time existed, but then did no longer. So think about that. There was
how far along into this before she duped you into the marriage that you weren't even aware that you had.
Right. So like, think about that. If I was a female and I proposed to you, Dan or Aldo, and I said, I'm going to ask you a question, but prior to asking you this question, let me just say one thing. I stole $50,000 from you, 10,000 of which came right out of Griffin's Memorial Fund. I also forged 4 checks in your name and have basically taken over your life as my own financially. Now, here's my question. Will you marry me?
Absolutely.
What would you have said?
You're Erik Kramer. I wouldn't.
Right. Nobody would. But I did. And it wasn't my fault. It's just that she took advantage of it, knowing that she could stop the investigation, which she was successful at doing. How crazy is it that we have a criminal court system that allows a district attorney to get a confession out of the one suspect and then not arrest that suspect after the confession?
With the timeline, obviously the thing that with the attempt is in 2015. When did she coerce you? Again, you weren't even aware because you weren't well enough to be cognizant of. But what year was it that she duplicitously emerged to marry you? Like, when did that happen? Just for a timeline's sake.
So the investigator came to Detective Linkshite, came to see me at CNS, the rehab center. Okay. What I came to see a couple years later as the incident report, here's what I remember about my interview with that detective. I come in, somebody at the front desk says, there's a detective here to see you. That's what I remember. I remember going in an office, don't remember which one, and thinking, how does this guy have more information than I have? That's what I remember. Apparently, there was $13,200 in cash advances. There was all this, ATM charges of $17,000 or $18,000. There was all of which she was on camera for. There was all these, cash backs at grocery stores. There was obvious things that would have been Courtney's daughters, like soccer. There was things for Courtney, which would have been like beauty things, whatever. So none of which were mine. However, a few of the things that I did identify as unauthorized were clearly my own charges, like gym membership and cafe at the gym place I went to. So I also identified, like, there was a checkbook ledger. So not signatures, just a ledger of expenses. I identified them all as fraud. So I went from that in October 21, and that part of the investigation happened fairly quickly, because on one of these Chicago trips that I took Courtney, her son, her daughter, my son Dylan, and me went to Chicago to see a Bears game. Prior to that, she forged a $10,000 check on an account that didn't exist, but that she still drew money from, that sent me to the red on. And so all of that, would I marry someone that did that if I was in my right mind? No. But here's a person
we believe you, sir. I was just saying.
I got it.
When
but
did
I'm
that
saying,
happen? Like, do you recall, or when has anyone told you when that happened? Is what I was asking. I'm sorry.
yes. So that day was October 21st, is when the 2016, when the detective came to see me. On what was it? On December 13th. This is after Courtney's confession. So her confession happened on November 29th. On December 13th, she's still not arrested. And apparently I go have my family law attorney. I sign a voluntary letter of, I sign a voluntary conservatorship of the person over to my sister. On that very day, Courtney's making wedding plans or marriage plans at the Santa Barbara courthouse. So there was no announcement to anybody that there's this great marriage happening, because by then everybody knew, because the detective had, Anna and my sister both wanted the detective to tell all of my family and friends so that they wouldn't think, oh, this is just something Anna cooked up or Kelly cooked up. No, this is a legitimate detective telling them all. And so by that time, they knew Courtney was stealing. And
so she basically, she did this marriage thing as a way to absolve herself legally, because she can't steal from her spouse.
Well, okay,
right. So she could not get it.
So you would think that, right? But and the deputy district attorney at that time, her name was Belle Chen. Okay, I don't know if you know this, because I didn't, but it's a fact that a marriage like this is a crime. When you know somebody's incapacitated, and she knew, you cannot get married to that person. Like, I was not allowed to sign a legal document, and Courtney knew that. So she even perjured herself on the marriage certificate, because it says, by signing this, I acknowledge that no legal objection could be made to this marriage. That's perjury. Just literally what? The detective told her, hey, now that you've confessed, just know you're still under investigation. So it's not like she didn't know. She specifically got married to avoid being prosecuted, and it worked. And so but the unfortunate part is the district attorney's office in every state is exempt. They cannot be sued. So they can make whatever decision they want to make. And it's a joke, because she made a decision based, like, apparently she somewhere she got her medical degree along with the law degree. Because even though no other doctor said this, she determined that I needed a 24-hour-a-day caregiver, even though Courtney never did a damn thing. And no other doctor said I needed a caregiver. And whoever said I needed the thief to be the caregiver. So, and then she also said that the marriage muddied the waters. How? Marriage was a crime. So, and the new deputy district attorney and her supervisor, they aren't charging her for the crime of marriage either. You know why? Because it would make it would make Belle Chen look bad. It would make their own office look bad. That's why. Even though they can't get sued.
Now the marriage has been annulled. Is that correct?
Yeah, based on her fraud and my unsound mind at the time of marriage.
Right.
I did not get evaluated to even get back my capacity until June of 2020.
And in 2020, I think it was February, she was charged with 12 felony counts, I believe.
12 felony counts, forgery, grand theft, identity theft, dependent. 5 of the 12 are dependent adult abuse, which apparently those are the worst because you're taking advantage of somebody that can't defend themselves. How they don't think that
really passionate about was he was falsely accused of assaulting her, and the irony was he has to stay away from his own house while she's stealing from his house,
and I have to pay for her to be there. And I had to pay to be out of my house to live in a hotel and pay for her to be there and pay the utilities for her to be there. And meanwhile, the day I got arrested, I went to jail without my wallet. She stole an additional $18,700 in 4 days. 4 days. So if I've got a emergency restraining order by the police, I can't be near my house, 100 yards within my house for a week. Courtney had her own temporary restraining order against me. So she was allowed to live in my house until that restraining order got removed. So if you're Courtney Baird and you know I can't come within 100 yards of the house, where's the safest place for you to be on the planet?
In your house.
My house. Guess where she spent the next 3 days on my dime?
In a luxury hotel.
The Four Seasons. So this has been nothing. She is herself a fraud. She used that domestic violence claim to extort more money, in an attempt to extort more money out of me. She used it to say, well, Judge, now that I got to be out of the house, I've already paid 6 months rent. I need to get reimbursed for that. The judge awarded her $20,000 for that.
Jeez.
Her brother's paying for her to live where she is. She's never paid a dime of rent for anywhere.
Now
the headline, though, we need to get the headline in. You were completely exonerated of the charges of domestic violence. Is that correct?
That's not correct. So what do you mean by exonerated?
Meaning that it was proven that you didn't do it. You didn't physically harm her.
Nope, it was not proven because it never went to court. It got dropped. It got dropped when Courtney got arrested. So the defense attorney that I had, the fact that I've never had a criminal defense attorney in my life. Now I've got to hire a criminal defense attorney who I told him this whole story. Meanwhile, he's telling the district attorney at that time that I'm guilty and that he had, in some backdoor meeting with him and the judge that involved the district attorney, he's telling the district attorney, okay, now that I've done it this one time, can I somehow apply for, what was it? In order to get the charges dropped, I had to agree by my own attorney's account to go to 52 weeks of domestic violence counseling and a year and a half of therapy. That's my lawyer suggesting that. So that lawyer had never consulted me on that. I found out about that from the judge. So I agreed to it only because he made me feel like I had to. Because remember, at that time, I was still incapacitated. So I agreed to it only to then find out, no, Erik, you didn't have to agree to that. So I unagreed to it and then hired a new lawyer who simply waited for Courtney to get arrested. But by that time, that district attorney, he didn't care what happened. He wanted me to go to jail. And by that time, it had been reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor. And so, but yet here I've got this original defense attorney on my behalf telling the district attorney I'm guilty. This is crazy.
Correct?
What?
But you did not do that, though, correct?
No. When the officer asked me if I put my hands on my wife, earlier that morning, I put my hand on her back of her shoulder to say, would you please go back inside? That's what I meant by, did you put your hands on your wife?
When you said yes. So
When I said, and all I said was yes.
right.
And yet that knucklehead has me in quotation marks in the police report as saying, we had a loud argument over finances that turned ugly, and I pushed her. That's not what I said. So that's why Courtney's not being charged with false domestic violence, which is a crime. But she's not being charged with it because the district attorney said, oh, no, what the officer said is looked at as a statement of fact. Really? My words aren't a statement of fact? Because he's a high school graduate and wears a badge? His what he says is true? And I think we can all tell from what's going on in the last year or more with police that what they say is often less than true, in fact, made up. And so, yeah, this has been the only thing we're born with is our reputation. It's free, but it doesn't take much to tarnish it. And so forever, that's what the world knows me as, a wife beater, which we never should have been married. Like, she should have been arrested long before there was a marriage. She should have been arrested long before there was a false domestic violence claim. It's just a freaking joke, not just the conservatorship court system, but as it relates to me, the criminal court system as well, and as it relates to a lot of other people in this country.
So what do you say to these kind of tabloid so-called journalism sites like TMZ?
Stop right there. Stop right there. As soon as you say tabloid and journalism, stop.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about tabloid, we can talk about that. Talk about journalism, which is a completely different subject, we can talk about that. What would you like to talk about?
Well put. I guess my question is, what would you say about TMZ and how they have handled the reporting of your personal affairs?
When you hear the letters TMZ, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Gossip.
It's what you read on the checkout counter, right? Going out to the grocery store. That's TMZ. So they don't report anything. They're not reporters. They're a guy with a microphone. That's all they are.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have to say about them.
But unfortunately, those headlines that they splash on their website make their way to social media. Many so-called legitimate news agencies then report on that and don't do their own journalistically based.
Right. It shows up in every Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, as told by TMZ.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to kind of, when you're the reader of that, you'll never see the LA Times quote Courtney Baird. You won't.
Right.
But the LA Times, the New York Times, all the legitimate news papers and the like, they will take TMZ at their word. If I'm the LA Times, TMZ wouldn't show up in the LA Times. But that's not my decision. LA Times has gotten themselves into the tabloid world. They've crossed over. I didn't. You didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get your news from TMZ?
Nope.
I don't think so. But the LA Times is fine with it as long as it says as gathered from TMZ. Well, LA Times just hoarded themselves out, as it did all the rest. So they made a decision that we don't want to lose that 17-year-old potential viewer. We'd rather whore ourselves out and put the word as gathered by TMZ. Well, it showed up in the LA Times. So technically, it's the LA Times that's reporting it.
Very good
And what's
point.
most unfair about it is you don't get a follow-up that says the charges against Erik Kramer have been dropped.
Nope. No one's ever asked me for my story. What happened that morning? Nobody. No one has. No one ever will. But I can recount for you verbatim and second by second what happened that morning. And the reason it happened in the way that it happened is because the night before, I came home and told Courtney I was getting a divorce. First thing I said when I walked in the door. And I'll guarantee you, she didn't sleep that night. Because this was the first time that I actually said something that triggered for her, oh shit. So instead of just saying, oh, I'm sorry, I'll leave, all night long she was spinning. Because when I woke up that morning, which was around 6 o'clock in the morning, she was up on the couch. So she always slept either on the couch or in what was Griffin's room. So when I got up and she was up, that was unusual because I didn't get home that night before till about 11:30 at night. And so in looking back, that's what happened. She scrambled and she probably at some point, maybe in the night, maybe that morning, probably called her mom, and her mom said, do this. So that's what happened. So no fact of any kind, like I never, other than putting my hand on the back of her shoulder, that was it. There was no argument over finances because I didn't even know my own finances. My finances were being paid by Raymond James Trust Department. I didn't have a bill. Raymond James Trust Department is getting sued in this too, as is the financial, whatever, professional fiduciary. I mean, this is a corrupt system. Courtney is simply the fly in the ointment. The system itself is what sucks. The fact that you can call up and file a false claim of domestic violence and get away with it. There's no mark on her whatsoever. Whatever there was would have had to been self-inflicted.
And didn't the police tell you that something to the effect of, well, you still have a lot of money. I mean, what's the big deal?
No, that was the new prosecutor.
Okay.
She says, you know, the likelihood that Courtney is never going to go to jail and the fact that you're okay financially, you won't really need the restitution. Jesus. That's the first day I met her. So, and she was dressed in like Anna had to convince me that was her. Like, what prosecutor shows up in jeans and a shirt for work in a courtroom? Hell, the last time was just last week. She showed up. She looked like she stopped by the lingerie store on her way to the court. The only one, by the way, in there in anything other than a suit.
So Courtney Barrett has pleaded not guilty to those 12 charges.
Correct.
Where is the legal proceedings at right now today?
Well, so she threw everybody a curveball. What this recent hearing that just happened, I think, what's today? Tuesday, right? So this would have been last, I think, Thursday.
Okay.
That hearing was supposed to have been about, so Courtney's been through 4 lawyers now, all at the same firm. This last one, she wanted that trial date or hearing date, which was going to be this past Thursday. For a month, it was going to be about what evidence the judge was going to allow in or not allow in. I mean, once a person confesses, what else is there? So that's what it was going to be. Then at the midnight hour, I get an email from Elena, that's the new deputy district attorney, saying that, oh, Courtney's now going to confess to all 12 felony counts. So, really? And then her lawyer apparently was going to raise an objection that I be able to address the court, the judge, in other words, like did not want me giving a victim impact statement. Well, we show up to work, or we show up to court, and they go back in the judge's chambers, and just the two lawyers. And he says, okay, so apparently you both agreed to all the facts of the case, meaning that, okay, in order to plead guilty, you have to agree on all the facts of the case. And the Elena says, well, yeah, I do. And the other one says, well, I don't. So he goes, well, then what the hell are you doing here? And so what it was she wanted to, the defense attorney wanted to trade out herself for Courtney having a public defender. And then, so that happens. So the judge says, okay, you're out, he's in. Well, then on the next thing, her then now non-attorney says to the judge is she'd like to get back part of the bail that she paid, because bail for her was set at $670,000. She wanted to get part of that money back, probably to pay the attorney. And the judge says, well, you're no longer the attorney. So no. So our now the next hearing date is September 30th. And at that time, now the trial is going to get set from there. How long that takes to have a trial or to set the trial, I have no idea. But it's games by Courtney. And so Courtney pissed the judge off. So she's only making herself, all these little games she's playing to avoid going to jail, which she's already admitted to. It's just, she's pissing off everybody that she can, probably doesn't even know it along the way.
PJ in the chat room says women are primarily always looked at as victims and men are pretty much always looked at as the suspects. As a person who was in law enforcement for 31 years, I saw it all the time. It's unfair. And Stephen Me says, so what's your plan, Erik, to beat this? We believe you. And how can you reclaim your good name? Better lawyers? Is she going to get away with tarnishing your name and reputation? What are your thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, the good part about now is that Courtney has lost any way to talk. So she's the one now arrested. She's the one going to jail. No one's going to be putting a microphone in her face. So the book I'm writing will tell the story. The podcast I'll be having will tell the story. The docu-series that I'll be doing will tell the story. It will take down not only Courtney, it'll take down this whole system. Anna and I have been working closely with Senator Hertzberg, who's California State Majority Senate Leader, on revamping and reforming the conservatorship court system as it sits here in California. We were a little late to start any laws or enact any laws on our own, but next year he set us up with the lawyer they use to write legislation in California. So in our dealings and talking with him, did not know he's a lawyer. And so there's one ally we have right now. So this is going way above and beyond Courtney Baird. And so I'll get to tell my story as it relates to that domestic violence. And I'll get to tell it in the actual truthful way that it happened. I don't need a courtroom to do it. I now have every means at my disposal necessary to do it in my own fashion, in my own way. Unfortunately, Courtney is a liar, a confirmed liar, and a confirmed thief. And it just once she is convicted, then the story can be told. I mean, the story can be told now, but it can really be delved into deeply and investigated deeply once she's convicted, because then it won't be hearsay.
Right. Well, this is a fascinating story, and I'm really glad that you're telling it in different formats. You've talked to legitimate journalists about this. There's been stories written by people like Dan Pompei and other legitimate journalists that have shared your side of the story. You're doing this podcast, you're doing this docuseries and so forth. And it's also a bigger story, as you just pointed out. This isn't just your battles with this dishonest woman, allegedly dishonest woman, is as a true journalist would say, right?
Right.
But this is also a story about a system that has let people down. And it's not just you. It's a lot of other people. Somebody in the chat room mentioned Britney Spears' name a little earlier. But there's a lot of other people like you and Britney Spears who have had issues like this regarding the conservatorship laws, that they are just blatantly unfair. And I am so glad that you are waging battle against the system and shining a spotlight on some of the things that need to be changed.
Well, I appreciate that. And you know, Anna and I, we're just two people. We can't change the world, but I think we can with what has affected me in this story, like people like Anna, my aunt, my sister, my son Dylan, friends of mine who live close by, they've all had to watch this happen over years and Courtney not get arrested. And they've had to watch the whole conservatorship court system play out. And it wasn't like I should have been conserved. I had a lawyer that worked against that. Only the way he dragged it out, it ended up costing me, like, had he just said, okay, let's do the conservatorship of the state, that would have been over in 5 minutes. Okay, let's do conservatorship of the person, 5 minutes. Okay, annul the marriage, done. No fees whatsoever. Maybe $1,000. If Bill Chin would have arrested Courtney, no legal expenses, $50,000 theft. So the systems with an S reeks. And so Anna and I will be doing our part to change both in the ways that we can. One of the ways we can is going through the legislature and not dealing with the police. Deal with the people above the police.
Erik, can I ask you, I don't mean this facetiously in any way, all this you've gone through and your recovery, is it fair for us as fans to say that you're well, that you're okay, that we don't have to worry about you, that you're, because we've talked to you for 2 hours now. We can hear how well you're speaking, and you're clearly, to me, able to communicate. So is it fair for us to say that you're definitely 100% yourself and you're in control of everything?
I would say that's a very accurate statement, because I do feel that way. And in talking with, if this will make you feel any better, Robert Tomaszewski, that's the doctor, that's the neuropsychologist that treated me. He's become over time, what would you call him? An expert, I guess you'd say, in severe traumatic brain injuries. And he said that typically, if you survive this sort of thing, which in itself is a long shot, but if you do, it takes about 2 or 3 years for the initial recovery. But along the way, I had suffered quite a few fainting and seizures also, which he said that now that's going to tack on about another, say, 2 years. So here we are about 6 years out, almost 5.5. And I'd say about probably a year ago, maybe a little more, then I really felt like myself coming about. Here's a for instance. Okay, so in October, like I said, October 21st, 2016, what was that? Just over a year after having shot myself. I'm driving. I am going about my business every day of everyday affairs. The day that the officer came to see me, the detective came to see me, not only did I not know what I identified, I thought Courtney picked me up that day. And when I got in the car, I said, "You're not going to believe what happened today. This detective came to see me," and blah, blah, blah. Well, guess who drove that day? Me. So I now know that I drive. I now know that you and I have this conversation. Aldo, I know what you look like. Dan, you skidded out here a little while ago, but so I know from one day to the next what I'm doing, what I do. I know what I talk about. As you said, I'm going to remember this conversation. So I think, yeah, I'm in terms, because there was my own family members. Like I told you, there was 2 houses that CNS owns. They chose the one, even though it's by the freeway, it wasn't as close to the on-ramp as the other one. They thought I might be walking up the freeway one day. So you're not alone thinking, okay, Erik, are you out of the woods? Yes, I am. Because I think medically, and as a medical professional, Dr. Tomaszewski, who, neuropsychologist, it's the only profession, medical profession, that deals with traumatic brain injury. There's not one other one. And so after seeing them all, and you can get them a number of ways, like you can get them in a car accident, you can have a brain aneurysm, you can fall off a ladder, all kinds of ways. Doesn't have to be shooting yourself in the head. But anyway, so yeah, I there's not one feeling that I've had in all this time that points to, oh, there's that depression feeling coming on again. No, I've got my son Dylan to live for and with and next to, and see him grow up and live. And just life in general is sort of a what's going to happen tomorrow approach. And there's a lot of good things going on right now. So I'm going to be here for a while, Dan, but thanks for asking.
That's a perfect way to end this interview. Actually, I've got an even more perfect way to end this interview, and it's with Ryan Schlansler's comment here. He says, Erik Kramer is the fucking man. Best Bears quarterback of all time and a hell of a guy. Erik Kramer, I can't thank you enough for spending time here with Dan and myself. We'd love to continue to follow your stories. So whenever you want to come on and share anything, whether it's about this battle that you're going through, these legal hassles is probably too delicate of a word. I mean, this is unbelievable what you've been going through. And there are certain things that about your life that you left out that, would even be more jaw-dropping to our followers and listeners if you were to share with that. But I encourage people, if they want to know more about Erik's story, follow him. Let people know where they can follow you on social media and where these upcoming projects can be found.
Yeah, well, like you guys found me on social media, which is Twitter. So I think it's EK Pass?
Yes.
Or EK Pass 12, one of those two.
I'll double check it.
Okay. And so, yeah, just that. And, my story is not going anywhere. And when you say legal hassles, it's almost like the way I look at it now, for several years, someone else was pulling my strings legally. Mm-hmm. And now I get to be in the driver's seat. And so it doesn't feel like a hassle now. Now it feels like the very people that were stringing me up, the roles have now reversed. So now I get to sit back and watch the axe fall on someone else. So in a way, it's like, and again, one of the things like right now, the people like Michael Harrison of the world, okay, that was the court-appointed attorney. Anna and I are going to be working so that people like him, when they don't meet a certain standard of care, that they end up going to be prosecuted themselves. So when that day happens, you'll know that we're doing, that will be in the news in itself, I guarantee you, because that's never happened before. So these lawyers have no, there's no oversight on them. There's the California State Bar, which is a joke. So you got lawyers looking over lawyers. You got the Professional Fiduciary Bureau looking over the Eileen Federizos, who's a professional fiduciary. How much sense does that make? So you need an objective panel of people that know, that can read the handbook of the professional fiduciary and go, oh, this didn't happen, that didn't happen, and that didn't happen. Therefore, you lose your license. But right now, the Professional Fiduciary Bureau is a joke. The California State Bar is a joke. When you get a legal system that looks over lawyers or something where there's some accountability, then you'll have something. And when those same lawyers and same fiduciaries go to jail, then you'll really have something.
Excellent. The Twitter account is @EKPass. His name is Erik
Beautiful.
Kramer. I'm sorry, Eric, say it again.
I said, no, beautiful.
Oh, and we will definitely be following your story. We'll be sharing updates on this show about what is happening, not only with the legal issues in your life, but we'll also tell people about your podcasts and about the other projects. So we'll be keeping in touch. Somebody in the chat room wanted to know the name of the fantasy football podcast that you're working on so that they can find that.
Kramer and Brill.
Kramer and Brill. We will definitely find that. We've got a fantasy football podcast on that. Maybe we can have you on as a guest and share some of your expertise with those guys and promote your show.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing to him?
Please do.
Erik, sir, again, it's been my absolute honor to talk with you. And please don't forget that I am going to send you those games. I have to record them in real time, so it'll take me about a week or so, but I will get them to you. And since you told me that you were a Rams fan as a kid, I also just recorded a game from '77 with Joe Namath as a Ram, because I think that's just a novelty that's cool. But I'm going to send you like 20 plus games in like a week.
I love it. That's back when he had no knees and was playing quarterback.
That is right.
Exactly. And he's playing against Jim Plunkett, who was a 49er that day. So that's pretty cool too.
Right before the 49ers became the 49ers in the Bill Walsh era, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I've got a very nice collection of past football games, thanks to Dan. So he's very generous with that. So again, Erik, you've been very generous with your time. I mean, what were we talking about here? 3 hours or so. So it's been great. And again, the comments in the chat room, people are applauding you and sending you blessings. And Dan and I can't thank you enough for your time.
All right. Well, I appreciate being on. Love to come on again sometime. You guys name it, I'll be there.
All right, brother. Thank you very much. That is Erik Kramer, former NFL football star. He is also a hell of a nice guy. And Dan, are you mopped up sufficiently? Have you got the tissue out?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I hope that I did okay. I just wanted him to talk, because he was so passionate about everything that had happened in his life. I just didn't want to get in the way. But I know we were supposed to be quote unquote interviewing him. So I guess in theory, I'm criticizing myself by saying I should have jumped in more, but also, I mean, just wanting to stay out of the way and just let him talk too and be respectful. So I hope that at the end of the day, I hope I didn't fail you or the audience or anyone else, No,
I think you did a great job. And I'm just reading, for instance, Laz writes, truly one of the best interviews I've ever seen. Dan was spot on with his questions, very knowledgeable about Erik Kramer on and off the field. Kudos to all three, Erik, Dan, and Aldo, simply amazing. And so we're getting a lot of those types of comments. Thank you, everyone, for
no shit, man.
For listening in. And this, frankly, I got chills because we do this show because we love sports, and we idolize a lot of the guys that we see on the football field, and a lot of the guys that represent our favorite team, the Chicago Bears. But all of us also know that there's something much bigger than the game. That there are a lot of things much bigger than the game. And when you talk with somebody like Erik Kramer, and he shares some of the battles that he's been through, it just makes you know that, hey, I'd love to spend another 3 hours talking to him about the past Bears and current Bears, asking him about Justin Fields. We had a lot of questions about asking him about Justin Fields. Hopefully we'll get to that the next time we have him on.
But he talked about it too.
Yeah, he did. He did. That's right. But we wanted to give him this opportunity to discuss in detail something that's very, very personal to him, and that's clearing up his name and fighting these allegations, and also the difference that he's trying to make in the legal system. And for that, we applaud him. And so based on what I'm reading here in the chat room, I think we did the right thing. And Dan, you were brilliant as always. Just your recall and your sensitivity with your questions, and I'm just really proud of you, and really happy that we had him on. It was a great show.
It was outstanding. I'm with the fanboy stuff with the football questions. I was so happy. But again, the second half of it, it was so delicate. My thoughts is I'm viewing the rest of our broadcast tonight more or less as an epilogue of that. It was kind of just like, I know that he wants to clear his name of saying he didn't, hit this lady and all this stuff. So I kept trying to lob up some alley-oops for him to say, I didn't fucking do this, So that was my, because I know I've heard him say, I haven't done that. I didn't do this. So I was trying, that's what I kept harping on there. From my own head, that's what I'm thinking. But again, I was just trying to stay out of the way. And I do think it's awesome that he wanted games from me. And I think it's awesome that he could recall so many situations while he was playing, like who the linemen were, who the tight end was in the play. Cause so many guys kind of just they're like, oh shit, that was 30 years ago. And don't really think about it, but he can talk about it like he cares, I mean, so I was so appreciative to have those moments with him to talk about the football stuff, because obviously as a fan, I care, but I can never play like he did. So it was just so cool to have that opportunity.
Then when you go back and listen to the show sometimes on the audio, do you ever go back and look at the video portion?
I do not. I don't have time. So usually I'll listen to the audio when I'm doing something else, like whether I'm cleaning my house or mowing the lawn or whatever. So it's more convenient to listen.
Sure. I totally understand that. But I would encourage you to make some time to at least look at the interview part with Erik, because there were so many times that you were asking a question and he would smile and he would nod. And he was like, basically kind of acknowledging, boy, this guy really knows his shit. This guy's got tremendous recall. I can't say exactly what he was thinking, but he was certainly, sending out affirmative body language to you when you were talking. So I would encourage you to go back and take a listen to, or take a look at the show from the video standpoint.
Well, that's cool. Perhaps I will. I hope that you'll post the audio portion anyway, though.
I promise you I will. We've actually been having some issues with our podcast carrier, Podbean, but they're telling us, you guys at the Barroom Network are sending out too much material. We know we sold you the unlimited audio plan, but you guys are sending out too much. And so South Burbs Hitmen had trouble loading their show. So I sent them a politely worded email and said, listen, I'm willing to pay more. I thought I was paying for the unlimited plan. And they said, well, we've extended you some more space to get your show out. So not only am I going to load this one, but also the one with Brandy, which was
I really want the Brandy one too. I want to save those to my phone. I thought the Brandy interview thing was so fun for a different reason. And obviously Erik Kramer, Man, it's like intense. I felt like it was a responsibility. Like despite the fact that I was acknowledging the fanboy stuff too, I didn't want to just come in and not take it seriously.
No, I think you did a great job. And by the way, you're coming to Chicago. I think all of our followers.
Oh yeah, we haven't said that on air yet.
Exactly. You go ahead and you make the announcement.
Oh yeah. So, God damn it. I had another concert canceled. My Nine Inch Nails Pixie show in Cleveland on September 21st was canceled. Now, if any of you all listening have concert tickets, and I got to give Steve Zimmerman an assist on this. So you want to listen to this point. So I bought my Nine Inch Nails tickets from StubHub. The critical thing was they were resale, like they'd already sold out, and I bought them from, even though it was a StubHub, but presumably from the first buyer.
Right.
That's critical. So when the show was canceled, the original buyer got a refund, and I didn't.
Oh.
Now, mind you, I had $875 for 3 tickets.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So that's $875 I wasn't going to get back. And I thought at first maybe I'll fight it. And then Zimmerman told me an anecdote from last year that happened to him. And his wasn't with StubHub, but his was with SeatGeek, which is very similar, analogous to StubHub. I don't recall who he said he had bought tickets and second hand tickets, and then the pandemic hit. And so they issue a credit onto your account. For my instance, like I got the $875, but so they issue a credit, but you have to use it within a certain amount of time. And for Zimmerman, it was through December 31st to 20. And nothing else got scheduled because of the pandemic. So he lost all of his money. So when he told me that, I was like, man, fuck that. There's no reason to fighting it then.
Right.
I was like, so I'm never going to get that $875 back. So what else can I buy tickets to? I was like, everything else can cancel. I was like, well, maybe the last thing that would cancel is the NFL because, they've already had a season without people there. So they're going to do everything they can to have a crowd. So I thought, well, shit, let me call Aldo. So I called you and I was like, hey man, what if I can take this money and buy Bears tickets and come to Chicago? He's like, well, good, let's do it. So obviously you offered me the opportunity to stay at your house in Arlington Heights. And so that saves a bunch on hotels and such. So I couldn't get off work. My initial plan was to come to the Cincinnati game the opener, but I couldn't get off work that weekend. So long story short, you and I are going to the Cleveland game in week 3. And then the next week I'll be coming to Chicago for the Lions game. Again, my goal is to leave here about 8:30 a.m. Eastern time Saturday morning, which will put me in Illinois. Knock on wood, as they say, if you don't get caught in a wreck or crash or something yourself, I should be in Illinois by that evening, because I'm going to gain an hour going into Central Time. At some point I'm going to have to get gas. I'm going to have to piss, maybe get some food, but figure I'll be there your time, 5-6 o'clock. Because it's like if I do a Google Maps search, just my town in West Virginia to your town in Illinois, it says 9 hours and 50 minutes. But you figure you have to add an hour on for traffic and other shit too. So I should be there by the evening. Maybe we can do something podcast related or eat dinner. I definitely want to see Mike Ditka's restaurant as a tourist fanboy, and then go to the college, go to the game on Sunday for sure. Do whatever we want after the game, and then leave Monday morning. So,
but here's the really, really good news. You're bringing somebody.
Oh yeah, well Brandy's going to come too.
Oh yeah, well Brandy's going to come.
No, I don't mean to like. I don't mean that as I'm not besmirching Brandy.
No, I know.
I definitely wanted somebody to come with me so that they could split the drive, and that's too long of a drive. And I honestly didn't know if she'd want to come because A, she's not a football fan, and B, even if she were, as she told you, she's from North Carolina, she's more of a Panthers fan, but. She said, yeah, I'll go. So that was really cool. It's not like we're dating or something or in a relationship, and she doesn't have any loyalty to the Bears, but she said she would still come and help drive, the way out. So I'm really appreciative.
Brandy, by the way, is in the chat room, and she wrote, "I'm so excited," and excited is all in caps. And she went on to say, "to meet Aldo." No, that part's not true.
Now she's traveled the world. Like she's gone. She like her kids are into like that K-pop shit. That I don't like any of that stuff. But she took her kid because she was into K-pop to South Korea.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so she's traveled the world, but she's never gone to Chicago either. So both of us are looking forward to it. We got about a month away from the Browns game, then another week on that in Chicago. Again, not to sound too sappy, I hope that I can meet as many people associated with the barroom as possible.
Yeah, I'm going to try to figure out a way where, that Saturday night or Sunday before or after the game, we'll have a venue where a lot of our friends and followers and barflies can all get together. It sounds good. By the way, lots of questions regarding Brandy in the chat room. People want to know, are you guys now officially dating?
No, we're not. That's what I was just saying. She and I, we're friends, I guess you could say friends that fuck occasionally, but it's not a shot at her. And I'm sure she feels the same way. We're a couple of hours away, and not to mention we're both in our 40s. So it's not like we run into fucking relationships. We're not in the 9th grade anymore.
PJ says that you sound genuinely happy with her and good for the two of you. And I agree.
Yeah, she's fun. She's fun. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Hell yeah, she's fun. She's good looking too. Look at that picture of her. Brandy Richey. Is that how you pronounce her last name? Riche? Richey? R-Y-C.
Are you sure that's the same Brandy? Because her last name is not that at all.
No. It looks like her. I don't know.
Brandy's last name's Williamson.
Maybe she didn't want that listed. Maybe just told the world. How much more time you got before you got to hit the road, brother?
Just a couple more minutes.
All right. So go ahead, please.
No, I was just saying, I'd forgotten that we hadn't told anybody about the second Bears game that came into fruition. I got 3 tickets. I'm looking at it now and see how. Again, I've never gone to Soldier Field. I've always gone to see the Bears on the road. So this is a lifelong dream for me. Now, again, and that's legitimate. I always wanted to go to the old stadium, but that's not plausible. But
she says, by the way, Brandy says, by the way, it's just her screen name. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we got section 255, which I hope is okay, even though it's in one of the end zones. But I got 3 tickets. I'm looking at it now. It cost me. Shit, it's looking at the order history. Hold on. I'm trying to see order info. Okay, yeah. It was roughly $775 for the 3 tickets plus all the fucking fees they put on it. So in the end, I had $17 credit still remaining with my StubHub because I got the $875 back and they gave me some more. Ended up having a credit of $1,060 or something. And I still have $17 left, which won't buy me anything. But whatever. So I got the 3 tickets, and I'm looking forward to that too. And I hope you get this show tomorrow because I want to download it onto my phone, man. The Kramer thing is awesome. I've been saying that since we started, man. The first episode. Wouldn't it be great to talk to Erik Kramer?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Steven says, I'm free that weekend checking flights from Ireland. Boy, it would be great, Steven, if you were here. Mike Schaefer says, pretty damn close to Mark and I in 250. Beers will be had. Yes.
Absolutely, man.
All right,
and
Mike.
Of course, he's always got a documentary with his Section 250. And I told you he got to meet Sarah Spain on that.
That's right. Mike Schaefer, make sure you check out the Sarah Spain interview tomorrow at 8 a.m. Central or on demand anytime you want. Here in the Barroom Network, Peggy Kaczynski interviews Sarah about all sorts of things. It's a great, breezy 30-minute interview. I think you will enjoy it. And got to tell you, our Chicago Bears coverage is just about ready to explode. We'll be having new programming every day of the week covering the Chicago Bears. And Dan, this is so funny, Dan, that people in the chat room are saying, glad that you guys are going to cover Chicago Bears on Dan and Aldo Bear Their Souls, but please do not miss out on the Dan's sex life segment of the show. This is
That's funny.
This is amazing.
I've got a request for you, actually.
Mhm.
If you can remember, I would like to, if it just a sidebar, whenever you're with Mike North again, just to I'm not trying to get you to play audio from us, I'm not trying to be a narcissist here, but I would like to hear what Mike thinks or his recollections of Erik Kramer would be.
Oh,
that would be fun.
That's a great question. I will ask him that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what Mike knows, because Mike obviously was in Chicago during his entire run as well.
Well, I want to say that, and I'm terrible with dates and stuff, but when Mike started his ascension in the sports radio business here in Chicago, was Erik Kramer was quarterbacking for the Bears.
Yeah, so that should be his era then.
Exactly. So I think he can speak at length about that. I didn't get a chance to ask Erik about the Dan McNeil smiling on the sidelines thing, but we've got plenty of questions in store for him the next time he comes on. And I'm glad that he's willing to come on the Fantasy Football Goon Show with Joe Mando and Adam Sham, are the new co-hosts of that show. Dan, you don't play fantasy football, correct?
No, I'm like Aaron. I'm a Bears guy, man. I don't want to root for anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I know. That's why I used to have like 4 or 5 teams, and so inevitably you were cheering against the Chicago Bears. And then I stopped playing for a few years, but now the last 2 or 3 years with the bar room, I play just one team. That's it. And I always make sure to have a Chicago Bear on my roster, so that way I can, kind of keep that in mind while I'm watching the Bears game. But other than that, I don't pay attention to scores, fantasy. I used to, watch the stats in real time to see how my fantasy team was doing. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I doing this? I'm not enjoying the game. I'm not enjoying the pro football. And so I've cooled down on my fantasy football fever, but I still enjoy playing. And I really, really like the fact that I just have one team. You should consider playing next season and doing the one team thing.
That's not happening. I'm sorry. I got to go, but the last thing I want to say, I thought it was such a cool story that he volunteered for us about how Al Davis's son built a special section for Mike Utley at the Raider games in Las Vegas, for his wheelchair and stuff. That was pretty awesome. And
yeah, and I put up on the screen that the Mike Utley Foundation is designed to financially support an effective function restoring treatment for spinal cord injuries. So if anyone wants to know more about that, just Google Mike Utley Foundation.
Yeah, the play, I can't remember who it was for the Rams. I can see it in my head. The guy jumped up to block a pass and kind of did that fucking chop that the Braves used to do, the tomahawk chop. He kind of comes up forward in a similar motion and hit Utley in the back of the neck. So it almost looked like he judo chopped his neck, but he was trying to block the pass. And Utley went down immediately. And goddamn, like I said, that was 30 years ago, and I remember it vividly. I can't remember who it was, but they were in the Silver Dome, and the guy from the Rams was wearing white, obviously. But anyway, the last thing I was going to say, because I got to go to my other job.
But real quickly, Jamal Lewis wants to know: Are you an Orton guy or a Grossman guy? I know the answer.
I was a Rex guy.
Yeah, he hates Orton, by the way, Jamal.
Well, my last question, and I got to go. Do you think by the time we see the Bears, presumably, unless COVID strikes or something horrible happens, in week 3 at Cleveland or week 4 versus Detroit, do you think that Fields will be starting? Is it going to be like a Mike Glennon thing where he starts to week 4? Or should we hope that Dalton is the starter because maybe that means we're winning?
Mm-hmm. I think that we are going to see Justin Fields sooner rather than later. And it could be even as early as game 1. I really do believe that the tide is starting to change. And the leash on Dalton is going to be very, very short, just like it was on Trubisky last season. I mean, you look back at last season, and Matt Nagy was looking for an excuse to take Mitch Trubisky out of the game, and that interception that he threw in Atlanta, that was like his excuse. All right, great, I get to put my guy in, Nick Foles.
Well, what if that would happen this year? Like Dalton to the bench. Nick Foles is coming in.
Get out of here. Go to work.
All right, man. It was great. Thank you.
You're the man, brother.
Yes, sir. You too. Bye.
That is Dan Aguirre. I'm so happy for Dan. I mean, this was something that he really wanted badly, was to talk with Erik Kramer. Now what I got to do is try to get Jim McMahon, his other favorite Bears quarterback. If I could get Jim McMahon on this show for Dan to ejaculate all over himself again, that would be a really, really good thing. I hope you all enjoyed the Erik Kramer interview, and that you let people know about it and retweet it, or just let people know about it. I think it would be really cool, not only for the Barroom Network, but even more importantly for Erik Kramer himself, who is trying to clear his image of, all this bullshit from the tabloid. He chastised me when I said tabloid journalist site, but these tabloid websites and newspapers that just publish the bad stuff, and then when things aren't what they seem, they don't seem to publish it with quite the force that they did before. So it was I think it's great for all of us to start sharing the word that Erik Kramer did nothing wrong, and that he in fact was wronged. What else? Tomorrow on the Barroom Network, besides the Sarah Spain interview, it's Bar Down. If you're a hockey fan, you really should tune in at 2 p.m. live here on the Barroom Network. Vinny and Joey are going to talk NHL hockey. Hey, they're not playing NHL hockey, but trust me, there's plenty to talk about. We're going to have some fun with that show. And then on Thursday, it's Crosstown Crosstalk. But also, I want to tell you that we're going to be debuting a new show. Danny Shimon is going to start evaluating some Bears tape for us. That's right. Danny Shimon, who is a outstanding scout for the Barroom Network and has done scouting professionally. He's now going to look at tape and analyze what went wrong, what went well in that previous Chicago Bears game. So we're going to start our first test of that show. I think we're going to do it this week. So, and if it's not this week, it'll be soon. So we'll keep you posted on that. We've got a lot of other new Chicago Bears show. Let's see what people are saying in the chat room. Steven says, after we go 0-2 and Andy Dalton can't defeat the Bengals, Justin starts in your Browns game. That would be great. I'd love to see that. I mean, that's a tough defense up there for him to make his first start. So I would actually love to see it happen earlier. But hey, right now, even with the limited amount of evidence that I've seen, I think Justin Fields gives us a better chance to win a football game than Andy Dalton. And I don't think Andy Dalton is a bad quarterback. I think he's like a Kyle Orton, better than Kyle Orton in terms of he's a game manager. So everything has to work well. The offensive line has to block. The running game has to get going. The play calling has to be better. And Andy Dalton's going to win you some games. But Justin Fields offers that explosive capability. Chubbs, I'm with you. I'm with you. It's Justin Fields time. Kelly Jordan says, I think the ultimate story would be week 3 against the Browns in the state of Ohio. Again, it could be epic. I like the way you think, Kelly. Steven adds, I'm happy for both of you guys. It was emotional. I'm still slightly shaking. So cool. Perfect. I think Steven is talking about the interview with Erik Kramer, not necessarily the fact that we are getting together in Cleveland in a hotel room. I'm shaking too. Chubbs, I have to say, as the most famous media critic on Twitter, I'm not surprised that they treated him like shit. Fuck the media. I love you, Chubbs. Michael Diaz says, retweet and share. Thank you, brother. Bruce Ali Walter Jordan. That would be a great show with Danny. I'm with you. John Buffon was announced months ago as the head of football operations here at the Barroom Network. So he's been working with Danny on the establishing of this show and a couple of other news shows. John is going to take us now to the next level, particularly now that he's got more time in his hand, given that Peggy Kaczynski is now doing Pass the Mic. John has been focusing on really embellishing what we have from a football programming here at the Barroom Network, which is really our foundation. Anyone who has followed the Barroom knows that. And so John is doing a great job working with guys. And in that particular show with Danny, I think I'm going to be co-hosting with him. I really want to be a part of that show because I'm a student of the game. And so I feel like I'm going to learn so much from Danny and chip in, with good questions. Hopefully I'll have some good questions and stuff. Steven, who is also developing a great show for the Barroom Network, details on that very, very soon. Steven writes, Kyle Brandt eloquently said, are we going to stop Fields from playing versus Aaron Donald? Are you going to do the same versus Myles Garrett? You should have him on the show in the future. Yeah, I would love to have Kyle Brandt on. I really enjoy that morning show, and he's one of the reasons why. And he's a Bears fan. And he's a very funny guy. So I would love to have him on. We'll reach out to him. Bruce Ollie Walter Jordan gives a heads up or shout out to John Buffone. Yeah, John, if you know John, this guy bleeds navy blue and orange. I mean, his love for the Chicago Bears is hard to top. And of course, with his uncle having played 15 seasons with the Chicago Bears, it's especially special for him to stay connected with the Bears. And so he has found a great outlet here in the Barroom Network. His show, Buffone 55, along with Alyssa Barbieri, returns. And that show, if those of you who have not seen it in the past, is a preview of the upcoming game. So we'll have on a blogger or a reporter or a podcaster who covers the next week's opponent. And John will interview that person so that we get a better sense as to who to look for, even on special teams. That's always like John's final question. We hate talking special teams, but is there anyone on the team that you cover who is a good special teams player that we should be on the lookout? And it's a great, great primer for the upcoming game. So Buffone 55 will be back for its 5th season here on the Barroom Network. That's it. I'm going to get some rest. Good show, 55. Yeah, it is a good show. Bruce Ollie Walter Jordan, where in Central America are you? I'd love to know where you're at and what you're doing out that way. Chubb says, I got a feeling us Bears fans are going to be talking about special teams a lot this season. Chubbs, you're great. You aren't kidding, man. We need to we need to figure that whole special teams thing out. And Chubbs, I think you're with me when I say that Tabor and Fields are not the type of coaches that are endearing themselves on to Chicago Bears fans. Bruce Ollie Walter Jordan is in Costa Rica. Man, I've never been to Costa Rica, but I hear it is sensational there. The climate, the people, the food. I'm from Puerto Rico, so I kind of got the vibe, but I've heard a lot of cool things about Costa Rica. It's on my bucket list of places to vacation. I'm tired, guys. I want to get some sleep. So I'm going to do that and let you know that I really appreciate you guys tuning into tonight's show. So God bless to all of you, and we'll talk to you soon.